think that would be good to see. I can do this after the guys, or if you want to do that. They aren't in the FTP anymore. They're in Davidson. There's like a really nice Davidson watercolor. There's really, you don't need one. Sketch up ones. Nice, but it's 3D view kind of shows you the mapping. Hey, Nora. Good evening. Good, thank you. Yeah, I had
Okay, we ready to get going? All right. Good evening. I'd like to call to order the special meeting of the Town of Superior Board of Trustees for June 6, 2016. If we could all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Thank you. Phyllis, could we have a roll call, please?
Sure. Mayor Clint Folsom.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Deborah Williams.
Here.
Trustees Joe Sorelli.
Here.
Rita Dozell.
Here.
Elia Gregoris.
Here.
Chris Hansen.
Here.
Sandy Pennington.
Here.
Town Manager Matt Magley.
Here.
Town Attorney Kendra Carberry.
Here.
Town Clerk Phyllis Hart. Here.
Thank you. Next is the approval of the agenda. I have a motion to approve the agenda. Motion by Trustee Gregoris, second by Mayor Pro Tem Williams. All those in favor? Passes unanimous. Thank you. Next is public hearing and adoption of a resolution approving the Superior Medical Building and Parking Garage, Lot 1, Block 12, Superior Town Center, case number FP and FDP 2016-02. Go ahead and gavel to open the public hearing.
Yes, please.
Public hearing is now open.
And I have proof of publication.
Thank you. Proof of publication is verified. All right, we'll go on with town staff.
Before we get on to this item, I'd just like to give an update to the board about the delays in traffic on McCaslin and Marshall Road today. City of Louisville is doing a mill and overlay on McCaslin, north of the bridge, of the McCaslin Bridge. And they had 2 lanes on our side shut down and 2 lanes on their side shut down for a good portion of the day, and it just caused a mess. So we're working with the City of Louisville to see if we can figure something out, whether it's nighttime work or some other solution. We're meeting tomorrow at 7 a.m. to see if we can have a resolution. If we don't come up with a resolution, I think we'll just tell them that they can't shut any lanes down on our side and see where it goes from there. So working on it. Apologize to everybody that
My
was
phone lit
stuck.
up today.
Oh,
Like,
I'm sure.
wow.
Yeah. So did Town Hall's phone. So we're working on it with them to try to figure something out. But hope to have an answer, a resolution tomorrow morning.
Okay, thank you.
Because it's a week-long project. So.
Thank you.
On to this item for tonight. We'll have a staff report by Stephen Williams, and then followed up by public comment and any follow-up from the applicant as well after that. So,
Okay,
Stephen?
thank you.
Good evening, Stephen Williams, town staff. I don't know if you guys want to do this 3D kind of walkthrough first, or if you want to get straight into the presentation and then come back to the 3D massing afterwards. This first? Okay. So this is our massing model that was updated, and I apologize, I'm not a flight expert. But essentially this view is kind of looking from McCaslin towards the freeway, and this is showing the existing Boulder Valley Ice approval when the medical office building was a part of it. And this structure right here is that medical office building, so we can toggle that on and off. That's the new proposal in relation to what was originally approved. So it's probably most helpful to kind of fly around with the proposed model, but if you ever want me to switch back to the approved, it's pretty easy to do. And if you want specific vantages, we can do that as well. It goes up and down and can basically fly 360 around of the building, but if you get motion sickness, I would kind of turn away, and I can let you know when I'm done playing with it.
This, I just want to point out, this is just a massing model. The architectural features of the building we'll have to show you in a different.
And this is great because this helps when asking some of the questions, when you kind of get bogged down in all the details in words, you can actually visualize it later.
Yeah, no, it's a good point.
So are the relative heights?
They are. It's all to scale.
Copacetic?
Yep, it's all
Okay.
to scale. So, and the actual massing is pretty comparable as far as the heights that were proposed. The Boulder Valley Ice BVI approval for the FDP allowed the MOB to be 55 feet tall, but you can kind of see from this angle that the grade changes. So it drops down in grade a little bit. It actually appears taller from this perspective, at least to me, as it was originally approved than as it is approved now. And I think that is somewhat to do with that grade change. And then the actual tower elements, excuse me, I try to point with the mouse and everything goes awry. The tower elements exceeded 55 feet. I think they went up to, I don't have it down here, just 57 feet or something like that, within the original approval. So,
But I need to ask a question about that, because we're talking about 7 feet difference. So is that really only 7 feet between the Boulder Valley Ice Building and the proposed height, the topmost point of the medical office building? It looks like more than 7 feet.
from this topmost point to over there?
Yeah, to the gray building that's being proposed versus the tan roof peak of Boulder Valley Ice.
Well, this to scale is 62 feet, 62 feet 8 inches. They're asking for, and
60.
then this is what I have down as just
Right,
over.
which I think is,
Yeah,
if you go to
it's about-
55 to 62,
right, it's about
you're
7 feet,
7 feet.
you're right.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you exactly what the, I mean, it is supposed to be to scale. We had it professionally done, and I did double check on everything.
So Stephen, is that leftmost Boulder Valley Ice Building, 55 feet? The leftmost Boulder Valley Ice, the one most near?
No.
Or is
So
it
the
lower?
scale of this.
I mean impact, yeah.
Impact? Yeah, no, it's not. The tallest point on this elevation here, the one that's closest, is 36 feet, and it slopes down to 21 feet in
Yeah,
the front.
that's, yeah, you've got to go over further to the right to get that
It is only 2
comparison.
feet higher. It's not the scale there.
Go to the tower on
Are
the right.
are
it's
you going to
closer.
move through it, or?
Yeah, I
Oh,
can, as
okay.
soon as you guys are, I just
Yep.
want to make sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Move ahead.
So, this is just kind of coming down Main Street, and I can slow down. So that's just going down Main Street, and then this would be kind of turning and looking down the drives, getting much closer. Kind of is a little harder to actually see anything. But we could also kind of come over here and look at it from Creekview Way. And also go over to the freeway and see what it looks like from that perspective.
Can you possibly go behind it or through, in between the BVI and the medical office building and get that?
How many feet is that?
Separating the two?
Mhm.
It's over 40 feet of separation from the closest point of the medical office building to the property line to the south is 39 feet. And I don't believe the BVI structures built to the property line, but I didn't review that plat.
Is that an alleyway or is that just a walkaway or what is that?
It's going to be a private driveway
Yeah.
that has parking on
And
each
parking.
side and then leads to the parking garage in the back.
With parking at the front, though, on both sides, head-in
Correct,
parking.
yep.
Yeah.
So do you want me to go through it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And to the very end, and I just want to see it from the back, coming from I-25, or I'm sorry, US 36. There we go, turn around, yeah. Oh, gosh. Yeah.
So kind of go up the road a bit and turn around and look at it again. And then kind of see what it looked like before and what it's proposed to look like now.
Okay.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
That's what it's.
Yep.
And then how will, if you go down towards the west to Boulder, what does it look like?
He's gonna make a sharp left. Don't look evil.
Must be a Sunday morning.
Boy, I tell you, yesterday, the fire was out there every 20 minutes on 36 with sirens blowing. So there must have been a lot of accidents on 36 yesterday. Somebody's sirens anyway were going every 20 minutes.
So I don't know what's going on. The toggle's not working with, there it goes.
Now, will you be able to see through it as much as it depicts there?
Likely not.
Okay.
The modeling wasn't done with much interior, like.
Well, that's okay. I just,
so,
it
yeah.
just seems very skeletal there.
Well, the
versus-
color too, I know that's not the real color, but that doesn't do it justice at all. It looks like
Yeah,
a
it's just a
prison.
massing kind of analysis, but the additional illustrations that we have for you today will help give it a little bit better perspective on what the finishes are.
Okay.
Okay. We can come back to this too if you guys
Right.
have any
All right.
questions on it.
Much better.
All right, as stated, this is a final plat and final development plan review for the Superior Medical Office Building and Parking Garage. The applicant, Superior Medical Investors, requests approval of both a final subdivision plat and a final development plan for Lot 1, Block 1 of the Superior Town Center. The subdivision request is required to divide Lot 1 of Block 12 into Lots 1A and 1B, and the FDP request is required to develop the two properties as follows. The applicant is proposing to construct a 62,000 square foot medical office building on Lot 1A and a 90,280 square feet four-level parking garage on Lot 1B. The image on the top of this slide reflects the front of the medical office building as proposed, and the image on the bottom reflects the front of the parking garage. Both are designed to face to the south. Lot 1, Block 12 is currently owned by RC Superior, the master developer of the Superior Town Center. Superior Medical Investors, as the applicant, intends to develop both properties and purchase Lot 1A. Lot 1B would be retained by RC Superior and eventually transferred to the Town Center's Metro District for maintenance. Though this application materials clarify that the parking structure will be shared and also serve the public, this is a privately financed development. Lot 1, Block 12 is located within Planning Area 2 of the Town Center. As this map illustrates, this parcel is on the eastern border of this subdivision and sits along the US 36 highway. It's also just north of the Boulder Valley Ice Building that has been constructed. The medical office building, as we discussed, was originally approved as part of the final development plan for BVI and designed to be part of the larger building. The current proposal is being processed as a new final development plan because of the extent of the proposed changes and due to the inclusion of the parking garage facility to the east, as well as because of the varying ownership that now exists. The BVI owners will complete an FDP amendment to amend the existing FDP for Boulder Valley Ice if this is approved, which would reflect that the medical office building is no longer part of that application. The applicant's subdivision plat drawing is shown here, outlined in red, is the current configuration of Lot 1, Block 12. The applicant's subdivision request qualifies as a minor subdivision, which involves dividing the two lots and dedicating several easements. The subdivision request would essentially carve out a 0.59 acre parcel, Lot 1B, in order to allow the parking garage to be sited on a separate parcel. Lot 1A, consequently, would front Superior Drive and wrap around the property to the south and to the east and contain the remaining 0.95 acres of development. In addition to creating two lots, the subdivision request includes 7 new easement dedications that are detailed in staff's narrative and generally illustrated here in yellow. There are 3 utility easements that are intended to serve the medical office building planned for Lot 1A. These are all shown here. There is a fire hydrant easement shown just south of this access drive. There's a fire line easement that will actually serve Lot 2C. There's a utility easement that would serve the parking garage here. And then this connection here is intended to provide public access to the garage and just kind of join those two, fill that gap, I guess is the best way to put it. The subject properties also are impacted by an existing drainage access and utility easement that covers this eastern boundary. This easement runs along this edge and will be discussed later in relation to the development of the parking garage. The FDP portion of this application clarifies how the 2 proposed lots would be developed. The medical office building, shown in yellow, would cover the northwest portion of Lot 1A, and the proposed parking garage, shown in blue, would cover most of Lot 1B. Portions of the medical office building would have a 0 setback along Superior Drive to the west. It would have a 5-foot setback to the north. It would be sited 39 feet to this corner here, and there's 10 feet of separation between the 2 structures. The medical office building would be sited to sit on the property line that separates these 2 lots. Here to the west, I would have a very minimal setback to both the south and to the east of less than 2 feet, and it would sit 15 feet from the northern property line. As designed, these 2 lots would rely on each other to satisfy certain requirements, including parking and landscaping to satisfy parking. A shared parking agreement between the 2 property owners will be provided before a certificate of occupancy can be issued for the medical office building. This agreement will need to ensure that the offices are afforded the 188 parking spaces that the town center requires, the town center PD requires. The FDP will address the landscaping needs of both lots. As landscaping proposed largely falls on Lot 1A, its owners will be responsible for maintenance. The medical office building is designed to face south towards a primary access drive. The main building entrance will be located in the southeastern corner, shown here. There'll be secondary entrance here in the southwestern corner. There's also an entrance point here, and this is where the 3 skywalks are proposed that will connect with the parking garage. Lot 1A is proposed to include 28 parking spaces as well. 27 of those are shown here just to the south of the building. The 28th space is shown over here. As stated, Lot 1A will also include the majority of the access drive that runs east-west and serves both of these properties. You can see that 14 feet of this access drive is actually on the Boulder Valley Ice property, which is Lot 2A. So certain conditions have been applied because this easement also needs to be expanded. So through the course of this review, the paved area within this easement, though it's only required to be 26 feet, the southernmost foot needs to be a foot south of where the easement currently exists. So this easement will need to be updated, and we've talked with the applicant, and they've been in contact with the folks from BVI, and they're working right now to update that easement to address that additional width. The parking garage, which covers most of Lot 1B, will be oriented to the south as well. The vehicle entrance is in the southeastern corner. This drawing also illustrates the location of the proposed parking spaces, drive aisles, handicap parking, stairways, and an elevator, as well as pedestrian pathways within level 1 of the parking garage. Layouts of levels 2 through 4 are comparable. 59 parking spaces are proposed on Lot 1, all of which are oriented north-south and accessed by drive aisles that vary in width between 20 and 22 feet. Stairways are proposed in the northeastern and northwestern sections. The northwestern section is also flanked by an elevator to the east. And then pedestrian pathways are kind of shown along building edges on both sides of the building. The dashed yellow line on the western edge exists, shows this encroachment that we talked about earlier over this existing drainage and utility easement that lies along the eastern portion of the property. There's a 60-inch storm line within this easement. As such, a separate encroachment license agreement between the town and the owner of the parking garage is required to allow the structure to be built over the line. Staff also required the applicant to examine the stability of this existing line prior to construction. This examination was completed on May 24th. The line was found to be in good condition. As a precaution, a cutoff wall was installed to impede water from flowing under the line in the future and to maintain its integrity. This map was included at the request of staff to provide some broader context regarding how lots 1A and 1B will relate to one another and connect to surrounding parcels. The vehicle access we've kind of discussed. It's south of the two structures and runs east-west. The other part of that, besides the 26-foot wide access easement that we already discussed, is that Boulder Valley Ice relies on a 14-foot wide easement currently to serve their property. And we've added a note to their site plan to clarify, to the site plan for a medical office building, to clarify that that 14-foot wide easement would be open and maintained throughout construction. The dashed lines here illustrate the pedestrian connectivity. These generally run on each side of this access drive east-west, but this also shows you how it connects to Superior Drive and is routed to the north and south. It also shows how a connection has been made to the existing US 36 regional trail that runs along the highway.
Steve, could you point out there was a parking spot? Is that the parking spot that's in another lot?
No, there's this one right here, and you can see that there's a little triangle here that's also going to require them to address that in their parking agreement, because that piece of that lot is actually on Lot 2A. So that's another thing that they're addressing through their parking agreement with Boulder Valley Ice.
Why even put that lot there, that one spot?
I think they maximize parking any chance they get, so it's just a matter of that's how the geometry worked in that particular spot.
It's off by itself.
Well, and it's not just a singular spot. There'll be more spots here that'll serve.
Oh.
So it makes more sense. It's not just an island of
The narrative said
itself.
that there was one spot, though, that there had to be, that went over into the other lot.
And that's it.
I agree. I
That's
thought
it.
that was kind of strange that,
Yeah.
why one lot make an agreement just for that one parking
Does the
stall?
They're
FDP
making
for
it-
Boulder Valley Ice include those parking spots already? See, we already have those parking spots approved in the FDP for Boulder Valley Ice from last year. All in that back area there were spots that were approved in that.
I understand, but
Yeah.
just the one stall just seemed kind of weird.
Because it
just
encroached
one,
on
yeah.
the other
Why
lot,
even
it
have it?
crossed both lots,
Yeah.
see?
And if they weren't already doing a parking agreement with the parking garage, they probably wouldn't be worthwhile, but it's just more of an add-on to the existing shared parking agreement that's being proposed and will be required. So, and then there's three crosswalks that are proposed in these locations here to serve basically the medical office building will use the parking garage as explained in the applicant's narrative during their business hours. It's overbuilt, so some of that will be shared all the time, and then the portion that they have that won't be used during their medical office hours will be open to the public, and the most likely beneficiary will be Boulder Valley Ice to the south. So those connections are important. The applicant's drainage plan clarifies that the majority of the site will drain to the south and tie in with the existing 60-inch storm line that also runs in this area. So we mentioned a 60-inch storm line up here. There's also a 60-inch storm line that runs south of the building. And all that storm water will be carried to the east and eventually into Track D that lies east of the Boulder Valley Ice Building. The applicant's utility plan clarifies where existing utilities lie and how the proposed development will tie into them. The medical office building will largely tie into existing utilities either within Superior Drive or already installed within this private drive aisle to the south. The big reason we're showing this illustration here is that some additional access or easement dedications were required. They're showing a transformer off-site within Track C. They need an easement dedication from the owners of Track C, which is RC Superior. So RC Superior will cover a handful of these dedications, most of them actually. There's some within Parcel H that need to be dedicated to serve similar type of access or utility purposes. And we can't dedicate those through this action because this plat only concerns Block 12, Lot 1. The proposed elevations for the medical office building are shown here. They reflect a variety of building materials, colors, heights, facade articulation, and relief. The front of the building will face south, as I stated, toward the primary access drive. The south elevation includes 2 access points. These are more visible here. This is the primary one on the southeast corner. This is the secondary one on the southwestern corner. The south elevation also includes 2 sign bands, 25 square feet in size, and they're proposed to be located here and here. Building materials and colors serve to distinguish the building corners, the base walls, as well as the floor levels. Each of these elevations features brown stucco columns that define the building ends and a red brick to define the space in between. 4th floors of both of these elevations are set back 3 feet. So the stuccoed area technically within the 4th floors is set back 3 feet from the 3rd floor level below. The design criteria require that to be a 10-foot step back, so that's one of the exceptions that they're asking for. Building heights on these elevations range from 56 feet 8 inches to 60 feet 8 inches. So that's the clarification that I guess I meant to provide earlier, is it's actually 61 feet. They're asking for 62 feet just to give them a little bit of wiggle room.
Steve, can I ask you another question?
Uh-huh.
What does this say right here?
Parapet. So
Okay,
the
but-
parapets are at a certain height.
And what does the height say there?
The height I'd have to,
Because on here, and I must be misunderstanding this, it says TO roof screen, and it reads 162 feet.
It's this way.
Oh, I see, so it's going across.
No?
Grade is 100, so it's 62.
Oh, it's
foot
60 at the above the
Right.
grade, okay.
But the,
And that's top of parapet screen.
wait, say that again?
So-
Can
If
you
you
go
could-
to the mic?
Yeah,
If you
we
could
can't-
come
yeah.
up,
Sorry.
you want to come up to the mic?
All right, I'm Bob Kroll with DSP Builders. That is top of the screen, that's the parapet, that's what that signifies. And 162 is, the finished grade is 100. So the building is 62 foot above it, so it's 162.
Oh, okay.
All right?
thanks. I knew it couldn't possibly be 162 feet up.
No.
that would be big.
So the corner here on the northwest corner, how high is that wall of the west elevation down in the?
Down here?
Yeah, it versus, because the grade is lower there than the southwest corner.
I can't see it in this
Well, the
elevation,
southwest
but
we
we
know
can,
is 60-something, but on the other side, it's higher. The actual wall of the building is higher, right? On the,
it may be, but we going to pull it up now, or do you want to pull it up afterwards?
Afterwards,
Okay,
I-
we can look at it closer afterwards. So the colors and materials proposed comply with the Superior Town Center guidelines. A handful of design guideline exceptions are actually requested, the height request that we just started discussing. The other request was the step backs that I mentioned. The signs meet the size requirements, but they're supposed to be no higher than the base of the second floor, so that would put them where this awning is. They're requesting an exception for those heights as well. Same thing for this west elevation. The awning's located where that sign would be, so they put it above the glazing where the next available kind of spot is based on their design. Both Planning Commission and staff were supportive of these exception requests, given the project's unique location. The town board, however, will ultimately need to determine whether these exceptions are merited in this instance. The office building's north and east elevations are shown here. They also feature a variety of building materials, colors, heights, facade articulation. Neither of these elevations face public streets or private drives, however. The north elevation will be adjacent to the sanitary sewer pump that sits on track C to the north, as well as the detention facility that's within Super Lot 1. This elevation will be visible to varying degrees from Superior Drive, Creekview Way, Park 2, and the US 36 Highway. A 25 square foot sign ban was proposed earlier in this location. Discussions with Planning Commission, however, suggested that sign be moved to the parking garage. Or they consider moving that sign to the parking garage, which they have, so we'll see that on the elevations for the parking garage. Signs for a medical office building per the design guidelines are intended to correlate with the building entrance and be placed at or below the floor line on the second level, which I mentioned. But because this was kind of requesting two exceptions, it was not only, it was about 55 feet in height and it didn't correlate with the building entrance. I think that, and actually the intent of the sign to advertise something to the north, which is probably most likely going to be visible primarily from the US 36 highway. The applicant, I believe, felt it was beneficial to move it to the parking garage as suggested. So we'll see what those look like here in a second. The east elevation here below is the elevation that faces the parking garage, which sits 10 feet away from it. You can see where those skywalks are proposed at the second, third, and fourth levels. Not as much material differences in this location, but all of these kind of levels are defined by these metal breaks as well as the glazing and the two-toned stucco finishes. The applicant's requesting the fourth floor step back the exception be granted on all of these elevations. So here it only applies to, this is the only area that would be stepped back a little bit, is this other band, and then up here it's the second, the fourth level on the northwestern side of that facade. Here are the parking garage elevations. They also reflect a variety of building materials, colors, and heights, and they utilize the same materials and color palette that is consistent with the medical office building. Because parking garage is rectangular, the building articulation will be minimal. The defining architectural elements will be the structure's four corners, which are distinguished by brick, split-face CMU block, and contrasting stucco finishes. The southern elevation here shows the parking entry sign and the parking entry location. Staff work with the applicant to extend the sign and make it three-dimensional so that it can actually be visible from Superior Drive to the west. As it's actually designed, it's a little bit larger than what was defined by the guidelines. It's almost 42 square feet in size, and the design guidelines say that a parking garage sign should be 40 feet. That's the maximum size, so an exception would need to be granted in this instance as well. And then here are the locations of those proposed signs. So two would be located on the north elevation, one here on that tower, and then one here on the other tower, and then one would face to the east. The heights of these are generally between 38 and 42 feet from grade. And then given the location of this parcel along US 36 highway, both PC and staff were supportive of the overall sign proposal. Town board will need to clarify whether they're supportive of additional signage. Parking lot signage within the PD was only really discussed for that entryway sign, so this is all net new signage. And as staff understands it, most likely this signage would be used to identify the medical office building's tenants. So one of the things that you should consider, or you could consider, if you were to approve these signs, is also whether or not you want to impose any restrictions or give any allowances on the hours of that they be illuminated. The PD requirements for signs is that they be shut off after business hours. The applicant's landscape plan sheets illustrate the types, locations, and general care of the species proposed. The species chosen within each category conform to the design guidelines. The landscaping density shown on the plan sheet are calculating those requirements correctly. A few exceptions to these traditional numeric requirements are requested. The applicant has proposed 139 foundation plantings, where the design guidelines require 288 plants, and this is based on the lineal footage of the frontage. There is a clause within the PD landscape that basically says, landscape sheets, that basically says that we do allow for 0 setbacks, and in instances of 0 setbacks, foundational planning requirements may not be met. This is one of those instances. The other exceptions are that 3 street trees are proposed, where 5 would be required based on frontage, and that 1 parking lot tree is proposed, where 3 are required. The applicant is requesting that the development be considered as a whole, which is critical to finding that either of these parcels meets the intent of the landscaping standards. You'll see, particularly in relation to Lot 1B, the only on-site landscaping is proposed on the northern side of the property. Lot 1A satisfies its landscaping requirements to the east as well as to the south. No landscaping is proposed or likely would survive between the 2 structures. The other thing is the applicants clarified that all landscaping will be 10 feet away from proposed utilities, and they've added a note to that effect to their plan set. These detail sheets were provided to illustrate compliance with other design guidelines requirements, which clarify on-site amenities, hardscape, and furnishings shall be consistent throughout the town center, and that furnishings shall be low maintenance. Staff finds these details to meet applicable requirements. The concrete pavers proposed will serve to both define the pedestrian way in front of the medical office building, and it'll also help direct traffic around the corner and lead them to the front door. These pavers were selected to tie in with what's already been approved for Superior Drive. The traditional concrete finishes are proposed for the walkways south of the parking garage and north of the parking garage. These match what's been installed on the BVI building to the south. The applicant's streetscape sheets also reflect the quantity, location, and finishes of trash receptacles, benches, and bike racks. The black finishes are consistent with what's been approved elsewhere within the town center, and the numbers of covered and uncovered bicycle parking spaces meet applicable design guideline requirements. So they're structured, or covered bicycle parking spaces are shown here, and their uncovered parking spaces are located in the walkway between the 2 buildings. Lastly, staff has conditioned this submittal to meet the conditions referred by Rocky Mountain Fire on May 12th. These conditions relate to providing required fire access standards on all sides of the proposed structures and are largely related to the building heights proposed. The most recent review round, the applicant updated their plans to illustrate how these requirements could be met, but other conditions are more construction related, so this standard is still on, or this condition is still on the approval, and will be ensured through building permit review. This concludes staff's presentation. You've seen the 3D massing model, and the applicants also provided these 2 vantage shots to help clarify building materials and perspectives of the 2 proposed structures. I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have.
Okay, thank you. Does the applicant have a separate or additional presentation?
Well, thankfully, my name is Clay Samus with Superior Medical Investors, LLC. First off, thank you, Honorable Mayor and Board of Trustees. I I understand this is a special meeting, and I appreciate the fact that you were able to make this evening happen, and thank you, Matt, for coordinating that as well. The answer to your question is the staff has done an excellent job, and I do want to commend them because, as you can tell, how concise and detailed Stephen has been. He's made this process quite enjoyable, and he's done a great job at the presentation. I might just add, we've been, and I'll reserve the time for answering questions later, but so I'll be brief. But we're excited about this project in that, we've been working on it for almost 2 years, it seems, but with Ranch Capital, just trying to get the structure, how we would come in and purchase this property and be able to provide the first parking structure for this town center, this master plan development. So we're at the finish line, but there's been kind of a lot of pricing kind of renditions to try to make this happen. It's a very tight project, but we still feel very confident that we can provide this structure as we're proposing here with all the materials. I'd just like to state that I feel like the massing, as Stephen has pointed out, is much better now that we've gone from a 600-foot long approved FDP building to being detached. And it was critical from a market perspective. From me as an owner and also as a market perspective, that we needed to have four-sided architecture, we needed vision glass, we needed air. There's more light and air to this building and this project and for these tenants. We also are providing more parking and excess parking than required and that was approved on the FDP. When we detached the building, we kept a lot of the same elements, undulations, setbacks. There's great fenestration. We did keep the towers, although we orientated the towers to be more of a focal and a focal point to the main street or kind of the town center across the way, since it's kitty corner. And we have those kind of architectural projections. I will maybe just, because I heard the board ask some questions about height. I just, in glancing at the prior FDP, there's towers that are, I guess 63 feet tall, as well as a BVI main center tower, which, as Stephen pointed out, 57 foot tall. As you look at grades, because of the grade of Superior, definitely a 600-foot long building made it more difficult. We've been able to minimize the 63-foot tower that with a 10-foot grade differential from the prior approved FDP because of the Superior Road, it created that 63-foot tower to really be a visual 73 feet. We've moved it. It's I think in height it's less scale, and that model kind of represented that it is ultimately lower. So I do appreciate your consideration of the exception, being that the medical office profession does demand a certain height. We just wouldn't be successful, and they're demanding that height from within, from floor-to-floor ceiling requirements. And then on the 8, just quickly on the 8 parking stalls in the rear, I would have loved if Ranch had accommodated the plat to hit that line exactly. It just happened in engineering. It did not work out. But we are working on, we have letter of approval from BVI owner, Luke Taylor. And the concept is we're going to be addressing that maintenance, the construction of that whole roadway to access and the shared parking. Those 8 stalls will be largely MOB, with that one being dedicated to MOB during all hours. And I'll reserve any time for questions later. Thank you again for your time.
Okay, thank you. Give an opportunity now for public comment. Any public comment?
Good evening, Bill Jenks with Ranch Capital. Just wanted to take a quick moment to mention that I've personally been working with Clay and Bob for the last 6 months or so on this design and kind of going back and forth. And Ranch is very supportive of the project. I think it's a great design. It's going to augment the rest of the town center that we have planned. And we're looking forward to hopefully getting under construction as soon as possible. Thanks.
Hey, Bill, can I ask you a
Yeah.
question? So my first concern when I read about these changes, I like the idea of it being pulled away, but it just being so square, I had concerns about it fitting in well with the rest of the town center. So I wanted to get your feedback
Mhm.
on how you perceive this fitting with the rest of the structures that you're going to be putting in
Yeah.
the square.
And unfortunately, we don't have rendered views of all the different views here. I mean, we've got these two that are actually part of our model. So you can this one gives you a little bit better perspective with BVI in the background here. To the right of this, off screen, is likely going to be a 4 to 5 story apartment building or condo building, residential, which would actually be a little bit taller, or at least the same height. I guess we're limited to 65 feet over there, so it'd be roughly the same height, maybe a couple feet taller than the tower on this one. So I think it's going to actually provide a really nice scale. That building will have ins and outs, and so it's not going to be just a wall on a wall. It'll be courtyards and trees with some good massing. But yeah, again, I think as you pull back, if you imagine coming back down Superior, to our left here is the new town plaza, sort of over here. And so you'll have retail there. I think the tower is important. That was one of the things that I actually personally pushed for is providing that tower as a visual anchor to the plaza. This is really the northeast corner of that plaza, and it's going to connect over not only to the adjacent apartment, but also to the adjacent retail and plaza. So you want to be able to have this sort of anchored plaza with architectural features in important places like that. So I think it's actually a nice addition, and I agree. Pulling it apart from the ice rink is definitely a positive thing, both from a tenant perspective, being inside the building, having light and air from all 4 sides, and also from a exterior, looking at the building, having 4-sided architecture and a little bit more separation in different buildings rather
So
than a
this
big block.
architectural style isn't going to look vastly different from the bulk of the town center.
No, I mean, in general, and obviously that'll be developed as we move forward with retailers and with the builders of the other buildings. I think these materials are certainly consistent with the design guidelines. Personally, I like the articulation, sort of the kind of pseudo-industrial look of these vertical window bands that are, instead of just a ribbon window like you would see on a typical tilt-up kind of cheaper construction building, this I think looks a lot nicer, and the applicant's done a good job of matching, quite honestly, the original rendering that was done as part of the PD that's hanging in the lobby. That was part of the big push for this architecture, was matching that original approved design.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any additional public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to discussion, questions from the board, or questions of applicant and our staff. Who'd like to start?
I have a couple of questions of the medical office building. One is I think I read that signs are going to be turned off when the building is business hours are over, but the business hours were ending at 7 o'clock in the evening, and that seemed to me early for an urgent care facility. Is that? I've gone to urgent care. Usually I need it later. So you firm on the 7 o'clock closure?
Yeah, it's not. Well, this is not a 24/7 type of emergent care type of situation or a pseudo hospital, but the 7 to 7 is reasonable for the tenant, and I would agree with you. Oftentimes you'd want urgent care to be open 24 hours,
Yeah.
but quite often they're not.
And the second question, and this came up in the Planning Commission notes, and I'm trying to envision, there was a question about how the bicycle traffic from the bikeway was going to flow into this, and I'm trying to envision that. I know I've been on the bikeway just a couple of times, and it kind of hits behind Boulder Valley Ice and the big ditch back there, and I'm trying to picture where this fits into that. Is there any way that I can get help with that?
Yeah, I could ask them. Huh? Yeah, do you want to switch that? It's me. To the roadway.
So I guess the short answer to that is that there is a connection, and it's probably shown. Well, let's get it to. So there is a connection to the pathway. The regional trail is shown in red, or green here, excuse me. And this will loop in and kind of deposit bikers here. There's no formal bike lane that'll go through this area, but if a person wanted to ride their bike to this facility, this is that kind of exit ramp that they would take. I also have illustration from Parks 1 and 2, which is just to the north of here, which shows the more formal connections, which will link into Creekview Way. If you want to see those, I can pull those up as well. But this isn't like one of the established connections, for, like more regional for the town center. It's just more of a destination type of connection for this particular lot.
Anything further? Okay.
If I could speak to the signage when you asked about the hours of urgent care. The 7 to 7 is appropriate or reasonable for us, but we had discussed in the Planning Commission, because I had asked if we could look at illuminating the signs, not all signage, but illuminating the signs at Highway 36.
Yeah.
Which I feel, because it's site-specific, where we are, the nature of our project, and mostly the location. I don't think I would be supportive, in the plaza or throughout the town center, of course, but being like all the other services along that corridor, I think it would be appropriate to be able to illuminate beyond the 7:30. So I would ask if the board could consider that that every intention to have one of the signs on that elevation, the parking structure, to clearly have the name Superior in it, being that we're Superior Medical Office Building, but also for tenant signage. Thank you.
What time would you be asking for?
Well, yeah, I don't need. I mean, the most flexible would be 24/7, but something in between, whatever the board would consider.
I'm sorry, can I ask Matt a quick question?
Sure.
What is the town code of lit signs? What time do they have to be off?
Usually, most of the sign requirements are under a PD, and most of those have a midnight turn-off time. That's what we've seen in other developments that we've approved.
I think we just approved 10 o'clock for the Starbucks over here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, 10
But
is-
like,
yeah.
I think Superior Plaza has midnight, and like you mentioned.
It
most
seems like
recent
we're
was
always
10.
asking for more signs for our businesses to be more visible. And I would agree that right on 36 especially, if there's something new in the area, something that's not in anywhere else, we should really make it as visible as possible. Maybe not 24 hours, but I would certainly say longer than 7 p.m. at night.
If you have a sign at midnight or 2 in the a.m., you ought to say Superior Medical Office Building, not open right now.
Is that what you're proposing, though, that it says, that doesn't specifically say what other tenants are there, but just the medical office, whatever it's going to be called?
Well, 1 to 2 of the signs at that corner would be specific to tenant, for tenant signage.
Well, there's only
but-
2 along 36 that are proposed, so.
With the Planning Commission, there was one on the medical office building that we had agreed that if we can approve that it get relocated to the parking structure, that we would agree to relocate that. So that would make it 3 signs on the parking structure, 2 at the corner and then 1 at the other corner, I believe. We could.
One on the inside, on the canyon, in the canyon.
There's 2 on the north side,
And
and then 1 I think it's on this
I have to
tower.
wait for the conversation to be over first.
Okay.
But we would absolutely like to advertise Superior Medical Office, yeah.
Okay, Trustee Gregores.
So the north elevation, the signs are shown there and there in the gray boxes, and then on the east elevation, it's there.
So overall, I like the project a lot. I like the fact that it's detached. Like you said, you have all 4 sides. That it looks much, much better. Just a couple of things. I think to encourage you or highly recommend that you maybe reconsider urgent care staying open until midnight or 10 p.m. at the very, at the earliest. I think that would be.
Encourage later hours?
Yes, please. Yes.
Yeah.
10 p.m., midnight would be great. Or have that sign stay open on the other side until it's open, actually. If you want to stay up open until 10 p.m. or midnight. That would be nice. The other thing, and I'm not sure what you can do about this, but if you're driving 36, and I saw the view, just like we see the view behind Boulder Valley Ice, in the parking lot, it's not the most attractive thing. Like, that doesn't encourage you. I don't know. Somehow I've always envisioned, cars going up and down 36, that they would see something really attractive that would pull them into the town center. So I don't know if the parking lot is the most attractive thing. I don't know what you. I mean, I'm not an architect. I'm not sure what you can do to make it more appealing, maybe. But I don't know. Am I the only one that thinks that? Or?
Well, is there going to be screening between the levels? I mean, right now that's shown as, that image you just had up was the bands of material were tan, but is there going to be some type of screening which might give it a little more of that building-like consistency instead of a parking lot consistency?
Good question, and I didn't touch on this as strongly as I should have. So this shows, I think, 8 deciduous trees on the north elevation, maybe a few more. We've required that they actually change 5 of those out for evergreen trees, and they gave me a site plan last week that actually showed that, and then the final one that came in went back to the old one, so that they've definitely demonstrated an intent to make that change. It just didn't get incorporated to this final one that you guys are seeing today. And then these are evergreens that would line the eastern boundary and provide additional screening from that location. So it's, a collection of deciduous trees, pretty thickly planted on both elevations in order to help break up that facade and screen the garage better.
But in between the levels, if you could pull back up that image that was up before, okay, that. So anything between the levels, the sections that are colored white
right.
in that drawing, is there anything?
No, that's open air.
Open air.
So
okay.
These are just the ramps, and then probably like a 4 foot wall that will help screen parking once it's parked. But nothing, I mean, you're going to see through part of that too.
So besides evergreen, is there anything else that can be done, or?
I just threw my thought on what visual impact to bring people. They look over at the town center, and I think that those 2 parks, when they get developed, you see those from McCaslin or US 36, is going to be quite impactful and draw people in. But
and we don't see the landscaping yet behind Boulder Valley Ice. There is a landscaping plan that hasn't, because it's not done yet.
Yeah.
They're going to be putting trees, and then that Park 3, that's whatever it's going to be, dog park or.
That's a good point, Rita, because right now it looks
right
like
now it's just empty,
massive,
but there
right?
will be landscaping around that detention pond behind Boulder Valley Ice, up around the cemetery, and I think that we need to really force the issue to make sure that's done well,
right.
To green it up.
I'd also quickly offer as part. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Do you want to go?
Well, and actually, I wanted to speak directly to you as the master developer and the developer of this particular project. Kind of looking at the overall big picture of this, when you're traveling on US 36, whether you're coming from Boulder or from Denver, you want this development to look inviting, so it's somewhere you'd want to stop at. If it looks like it's a concrete structure with tons of, parking garages and the backside looks like warehouses, it's not exactly, a place I'd want to stop at. I kind of gloss it over and keep moving. So when you're developing these things, I would think very highly on what you're going to do on the back part to make it look just as appealing as the front. And, I'd have to say BVI is not perfect. It's better than it was when we first saw the design. I know you're laughing. But when you are driving from Denver here and you look at the back on US 36, it's not inviting at this point. So my concern here is this backside, which is the north elevation and the east elevations. it looks cold. And so I was actually going to read something from the design elements here. And under, let's see here, 4.5, there is, and then D, 4.5D, oh gosh. Yeah, under D. It talks about parking structures and parking beneath buildings. The appearance of parking structures, whether freestanding or attached, should relate clearly to the building they serve, which I see that you're doing. Should contribute positively to the character of any development. Now, that's where we're a little bit lacking there. And then the incorporation of parking structures in the mixed-use town center is encouraged in order to minimize the visual impacts of parking. Well, and I see that as two ways. Minimize the visual impacts of parking, like street parking, or also hiding the cars that are in this particular parking structure. So when we have the open pieces there, you clearly can see that's a parking structure. If there's any kind of design element that could hide that, I don't know if it's, the glass, maybe it's not see-through glass, maybe it's mirrored glass, or something that gives it some sort of elevation, so to speak. No pun intended there, but it just gives it an extra oomph, because right now, not so great.
Yeah, and I got to say, I totally agree with all the comments. It's very important that this development look inviting when you drive by. There's kind of two ways to think about it, right? One way is your experience of the town center from the inside, which I think ultimately is the more important one, which is why the use makes sense to put the building closer to the town core and put the parking on the outskirts closer to the freeway, and from noise and everything else. It makes a lot of sense from a use standpoint. To your point, you don't want to drive by on the freeway and just see parking structure back of BVI, and I completely agree. I'm going to leave it to Clay to talk about what kind of changes might make the parking structure more attractive. You can always add some glass in one of those towers and some kind of storefront that makes it look a little bit more like a building, which can look good. From a master developer standpoint, I'd offer I would tend to focus on screening the parking structure in the back of BVI with trees and landscape, and focus on the attractive parts of the development, which we're going to need some really, really cool architectural signage, whether it's a water tower or something related to coal mining or something like that has some retail tenant signage on it, and retail downtown Superior signage. We'll obviously work with staff and with you on what that looks like. That's going to need some really good visibility, which will draw attention away from the parking structure. It'll be this cool thing. Also, as you drive north on 36, you'll also see the north corner of Block 6 and Block 7 here, which those are going to be the front of a building facing the park with balconies and people, and that's going to look really nice. And so you will see that as you come north on 36. You'll also have the two hotels, which is going to be, again, people, windows, balconies, all that kind of thing. So I think once we get the rest of the development going, this parking structure is going to fade.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Well, and do take a look when you're on 36. Take a look at Interlochen and the buildings that are there. Some of those buildings have some really cool architecture, and they're facing US 36, so they're extremely inviting and architecturally pleasing and interesting. So that would be, my other little concern.
That's the actual building. That's not the parking garage.
Correct,
Yeah.
and that's some of the buildings that are in Interlochen.
But the reason, the reason Interlochen can do that is because it's a more suburban. You have an office building in the middle of a parking lot, which that's no problem if it faces the freeway. There's nothing else to face. For us, we want to create this urban core where everything faces in and creates this cool urban downtown street that they just don't have. And so it's a little bit different planning philosophy. And again, it's looking at it from the inside rather than the outside.
And the inside takes precedence, obviously, over the outside. I mean, I appreciate your comments.
Well, I appreciate your comments. Board Member Williams, I feel, because we've worked hard at this parking structure, knowing that this is a concern. I think the landscaping will dramatically help. And I share the same kind of concerns with the back of BVI. So I'm looking forward to seeing the landscaping get improved there.
Clay,
Ultimately.
realistically, the tallest trees,
Right.
how tall are they going to get? Are they going to reach to,
20 feet.
how much,
I think the evergreens could be,
yeah.
or not 40? Okay, I was going to say 40 feet evergreen. Okay, well, the consultants are saying 25 to 30 feet.
That's what's going to be
but
planted?
No, that's not.
No,
That's when it reaches its, and
The
trees
growth.
grow very slowly here, very.
But if I could just continue with just so you know what we did do in my mind, I think we created a parking structure. I could just go up or down.
Down from there.
There you go. I think that will work. Well, it's the wrong side, but it gets the idea.
The dinging's new, sorry. That's the one you want.
Yeah. But if you look on the east, I think there's 5 different type of building materials. The corner tower certainly helps. This is not a square, plain parking structure. In my mind, we took the extra care to put a base to incorporate not just the CMU, but the brick, the variation in the stamping and the different colors, and this vertical articulation at the corner. This will not come off looking white. It's going to be darker in nature and more consistent with what the building looks like. So I don't think you won't be staring at those lines like that. I think it will look better. Clearly, the landscaping in front will help with that effect.
Will you be able to see the cars in?
No, you will not. That's a 42.
I interpreted the white as air.
Yeah, that's right.
You're right. It is. I'm sorry. It is air, but dark. What I meant by dark is that there's a ceiling that
Oh,
from
I
your
see.
vantage point, you'll be
Right.
staring at that same color ceiling, so you won't be staring at white. Your comment about the requirement for the parking lot, I think minimizing parking and visually seeing cars, in my mind, is taking 90,000 feet of surface parking plus all the drive aisles and putting it in a vertical structure that is actually quite costly. And the fact that we're skinning it the way we are, we're kind of at our limits. But I would like to see if you have any more other concerns or suggestions. I think the landscaping is important and for the success of our project. So the evergreens are something that we will make sure go in on both sides.
Usually I get a little serious about the aesthetics, and interestingly, this design of this parking lot did not bother me at all. I expect to see cars, doesn't bother me. I do like the color changes and the style changes and all that kind of stuff. When you put the landscaping in, particularly to the east, does that landscaping have the potential to be bermed in any way so that we can elevate those trees from the get-go so they give the appearance of being higher?
We're fighting grades. In fact, this whole project is fighting grades just in every existence on all sides. Superior sloping on one, BVI up high on the other. A detention basin that's much lower than, to answer your question, Highway 36 and that bike improvement. But planning as close as we can within reason to our footings and ultimate growth to maximize height will be what we'll want. And we're not going to want just a line. We'll be trying to scale.
Yeah, I get
alternating.
it. So no.
But
Vertical planters or mounding wouldn't be possible.
Right.
But Sandy, there are other evergreen trees that grow far beyond 20 and 30 feet.
Right.
I mean, so that's the
That's
other
what
thing.
The
choice of trees that could grow up to be 50 or 100 feet.
The other possible idea, when you have only 139 of the 288 required plantings, it is possible to investigate this idea of actually putting pots on the levels of the parking garage that actually have green growing in the pots, so that you actually have that face of the building that has green on it because you've got trees growing in pots. So inside the garage, and so rather than Clint's building material screening, you actually have green screening. And the benefit of green screening is always it shows life and vibrance and all that kind of stuff. So, and possibly that could be achieved cheaper than doing it with building materials, but of course you're going to give up space that way. But what I'd like to do is actually go to what I think is the much more important aspects, which is more of the interior aspects, and let us mull this concept over and come circle back around to it. Because I actually have a problem with the zero setback on Superior Drive, and the lack of a main entrance right there. I understand the logic for the main entrance being closer to the junction of the parking garage and the building on the southeast corner. However, that always happens all over the world. You go in that building and it's an auxiliary entrance when you come off the parking garage. And the main entrance is still off your main street, even though that is not where you necessarily get your largest number of customers coming through the front door. So I miss that on this elevation. I'm not a fan of the zero setback. I'm not a fan of no main entrance right on Superior Drive.
Personally, I'm not either, to tell you the truth. So if we could have in this project been able to provide a setback so we could control our own landscaping and create some curb appeal of our own, we would there. Like the prior FDP and the other buildings on a zero lot line, we had to take the same approach because if and when we look at the all the building components, there wasn't room to move. We can't move anything farther to the east in order to incorporate that. So I was comfortable with that decision when I completely further understood the pavers, how nice Ranch and you all have approved the match plan development and what's going on along there. Oftentimes you'll see retail and other buildings on zero lot line. It's not unusual, and I think that with this situation being that there's landscaping, there's lighting, and there's pavers, it's quite a nice right of way. So I think that's it satisfied my concerns of zero lot line along Superior.
Doesn't this depict though an entrance on the front?
Yeah, and I'm sorry to answer the second part of the question. Absolutely, we would prefer to have maybe an entrance at the front, but due to the market and the parking and where people are coming to park,
So you're coming
the
in.
tenants and
The auxiliary entrance is right here under.
The back.
this is the primary entrance,
Right.
as Steve had mentioned, where the elevators are located. So our building is
Me too.
flipped when you look at our floor plan. Our elevators are in the back. There's a corridor that links this, but
Do you mind
because-
speaking into the mic?
Because the parking is in the middle of the project, we have to have the entrance in the middle of the project. And that's kind of a demand of the market and our tenants. But so that we still had a curb appeal and that look, we have a secondary entrance that looks almost like a primary entrance. We spent the money to make it look like a primary entrance.
But are you
But
having
who
two
would-
entrances or one though?
Yeah, who would use that secondary? What is that auxiliary with the ramp? Well, who would use that?
It's going to be directed, well, for exiting, so the tenants inside will exit the building that way.
Oh, so
If
it's
they're
not
going
an
to-
entrance, it's an exit.
If they're going to the
primarily.
plaza.
Okay.
So as emergency egress, but signage will direct, to the southeast corner as the front entrance of the building.
It's not a main entrance, but it's
You can go
get
in it.
You can go in though.
But where does it lead? Where
No,
does
he
this
said
one-
it's egress primarily.
What
It's sort of
happens
leaving,
if I go in
not-
here? That guy looks like he's going
Right.
in to me.
Yep.
Is he?
It's a secondary entrance, and one concept, we were going to have a pharmacy, we would create that, be a storefront for the pharmacy. So yet to be determined, but right now it looks like that's an egress, secondary exit for tenant.
But
And
I'm
then
talking
if
about
you
the
go
one
in
on
there-
this side, though. That
Huh?
one is an egress one. The one there, that one.
I didn't know. Is there
That's a
something there?
There's actually two egress. There's a stairwell that runs here in the middle of the building. And so that's why the ramp and the egress, because everything's falling with Superior. So we exit from the finished floor and then ramp down.
Do you mind going back to the mic and use the
I
pointer?
apologize.
It's just people.
We're going to
people,
tether you to the.
So do we have
People
another?
listening on-
Do we have
on the
another
TV
depiction
can.
of this,
Okay.
Stephen? Here that shows windows and stuff. I'm not seeing any articulation in this one.
Show the west elevation. See, those are just exit doors there. Those two down little ones there, right there.
You can enter though, too.
No,
That's-
not entry. Exit.
That's correct. This is exit because it's
It's
from the
exit
stairwell.
only.
And we wouldn't want to address or try to create that as a main entrance because it's
That's right.
into a stairwell. You want to speak to any of this, Phil?
Sure.
Why the orientation?
Bill Smith, I'm with Intergroup Architects. This door here is for the electrical room access and the fire sprinkler access. And then this is the stair core. And to kind of answer the question, when I come around the corner, this is a secondary entrance exit to this space. What we've tried to do is make it look like their main entrances. Similar to this feel here. I mean, it's almost the exact same. But to your point, and to Clay's point, is everyone is going to be directed as they come to this location here. And this is where everyone's going to come because generally most of the people that are going to be here are going to be in the parking structure. And it's a quick jaunt across. Can I go back just a couple to one of the site plans? Because we have a floor plan. That's great right there. This kind of depicts the floor plan of what's going on the first floor. So here's our main entrance. And again, we've got a main double door here and a main double door here, and then it goes into this large 2-story atrium vestibule where the main door comes in here, which allows people to go to the elevators. This is the first suite, as we would say, and this, I think, was the urgent care. And then this was always planned and talked about as the medical imaging. So to access medical imaging, you would come down this corridor to this opening here. So this is a secondary exit. It's more of an exit than an entrance. And this one's more of an exit than an entrance. But it could be the way this suite lays out, that it could be an entrance if that's the way the imaging company wanted to do that. And I think that might be a possibility of doing that. It's just not a grand entrance.
Right.
How would if I'm parked in the first floor of the parking garage, I would use this corner, would I use the southeast corner entrance to this building?
Yes.
If I was parked on the second floor, I'd use the walkover.
Correct.
Or the third, or the fourth.
Again.
Well, is there a fourth? Is there a
Yes.
walk across
Yeah.
on the fourth level?
Yeah.
3.5? Okay, and so then, to me, it just seems like, I guess only the first floor people would actually use that that so-called front entrance, which is in the canyon. You know, I'm calling it the canyon between Boulder Valley Ice and the building there. It just doesn't seem like it's a front door to your building. I don't have a problem with it being there, but for me, it's hard to see it as a front door to your building. Because the front door should be on the main street, and right now that looks like the side of the building or the back of the building on Superior Drive, which we consider one of our main primary streets. For if I'm driving up and down Superior Drive looking for your front door, I'm not going to find it very easily. That's my view. I just
Understand.
And
I
I
think-
don't like the side that looks like the west side, which is the prominent side of every building within Superior Town Center, is the west side of the buildings. That side looks like a back of a building to me, you know, in the elevation drawings that I've seen. I know over there it looks better, and the one that when you throw it up there, I think it's deceiving too. You only have 3 trees there. You got diagonal parking. If you throw that one up, that's on the chair there I'm showing. Stephen or Bill.
No, still scroll down.
You can scroll it on the screen, I'm sorry. So the pretty picture, oh, there you go, okay. So what's down on this lower left corner here of the screen is Superior Drive, is that correct? And then going through there is the access drive where that black SUV is coming out, is the access drive where, and I can't even see the front door, I know where it's at, they're way at the back side over there, right before the parking garage. So I'm looking for the front door, and I've got to go down through an alley, past some parked cars, into a parking garage, and if I park on the first floor, then I can come out and access that. And I'm being a little bit more facetious probably than I should be, you know. And then over here, on this side, on the west side, again, you don't see those two, the electrical or utilities access door because of this one tree, this 2.5-inch caliper tree that's going to be planted there. Yeah. And then the 2 trees on the corner, now they're in the center of this picture. I don't know what this building is over here. I don't know what this. That's our lift station. Oh, that's our lift station. Oh, yeah, okay, I see. It looks prettier than, does it look that nice? So, and there's only 5 feet, and that looks a little odd too, like there's more than 5 feet between the lift station and your corner of your building. And there's 2 trees there that aren't on the plan, I don't believe. You know, those 2 trees that are in the center of the picture there behind the lift station, those trees don't exist on these sheets, at least I couldn't find them. So there's those 2 trees that are the next 2 that are in the center. But this picture looks better than I think it's going to actually result, because this is not what's shown on these long sheets, quite. And I'd almost be before, because I don't like zero setback either. I mean, I think that's hideous, zero setback, and especially on Superior Way or Drive, whichever we're calling it now, Way or Drive. But one of our main streets, to have just this diagonal parking in there, and then the side of a building, and I can't find the front of it. I'd almost say take out the parking there and let them park in your garage instead of having it feel like I could get out and go into the building on this side of the street, and put landscaping there.
Like, just looking at the drawings, I believe the 5 feet is the property line. The pump station is yet another 20 feet, so I think there's probably 25 feet of potential landscaping there, 5 of which is on our property, and then we're getting an easement for other utilities. So
the trees are planted on the Superior pump station property. Oh, and you're going to plant those, Bill? Okay, all right, thanks. Because they weren't shown. There was only a 5-foot between, but okay, that makes me feel more comfortable that the buildings aren't cramped right up to each other. And I think finding light coming from the east down the canyon to the west, you know, for the sun to drop in there, you know, when you've got a 55-foot building over here and a 62-foot building over here and 25 or 30 feet in between, you know, and I'm not talking about this side, I'm talking about the other side now. It's going to be kind of difficult to get sunlight in there, I think, for that space. It also looks more sunny and lit than I think it actually will. You'll actually see, yeah, right in there. See, that looks like the sun is directly above that access there. And I don't think we should be deceived. We're not going to get that much sun there.
Yeah, have we done the shade studies on this particular alignment without the recessed 10 feet on the top floor on the south there?
No, we have not. And when you were talking about the light problem, were you talking about between the parking and the, our floor plan is kind of taking that into consideration, obviously, and we've got elevator, equipment rooms, and I mean utility rooms was what I meant by equipment rooms and janitorial, but also the restrooms.
Right.
The corner offices would still take advantage of that light, and the parking structure is set back. I'm talking on the north,
right,
on this opposite corner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was wondering, you know, you're going to put your people down on the, or I don't know whose people it is, medical office, people looking out to the parking garage, I guess, to the east, you know, the 2 rows of windows there. I wouldn't want that office, but, so, you know, in the backside, looking 10 feet across a concrete alleyway, you know, that's between there. Okay, so I'm gonna go through my is it okay? You know, I've got a few questions here that came to mind when I was looking at, not that many really, but I got a page of them. Plus, I've got a whole page on my long sheets. So let me try to go through them quickly. And I'm being critical in a constructive way. That's what I want to be, not critical in a destructive way, I hope. Because I love the idea, always loved the original plan and view that we approved a year ago now, on the 8th of June. It'll be a year since, not me, I wasn't here or no, it was actually, yeah, it was true. I don't know, whenever it was approved last time. But, so, this west side, I just don't like it because it looks like a back of a building or a side of a building where I can't really figure out what's going on there. And the tenant name you've got way up there on the second level, above the second level, I don't have so much of a problem with that, but I'd like to be able to go in the door there underneath the tenant sign. That's just a personal preference. And then, like I said, on the front then is not, it's kind of plain and unattractive. So we talk about the unattractive side on 36. I really don't mind that either. I don't mind that's where the parking garage should be. I think it's great. Put it over there along 36 on the east side on 36. But this front side on the west side, which will be facing out to one of our main streets and to the close to the plaza, and then across from that will be hopefully high-end apartments or condos, you know. And even the height at first gave me a little bit of a qualm, but when we're talking 62 feet on the top of that tower, and the majority of it's probably a little bit less than that, it's higher than Boulder Valley Ice Building, but it's not higher than what's going to be across the street. So if they're at comparable levels, then I think that's fine. I'm looking kind of at Bill and all of you that I don't really have too much of a problem with that. I do think, though, that I was worried about the 5-foot setback between the lift station and the medical office building, but I'm happy to hear that there's like a 15 feet or something that's between that. Then that concrete between the medical office building and the garage, I guess you have that for drainage, but I don't know why you'd have a 10-foot. I think I said 5, but it's a 10-foot concrete walkway between the actual medical office building. Okay, my mind just came to, because you're going to give that lot over to the metro district, so you've got to have some kind of a separation there. So you're not going to connect them because of that. I just don't know what you're going to do about that. It's just going to be a concrete. Basically, if you could try to make it kind of interesting, if nothing else, you know, that concrete sidewalk or drainage ditch or something in there. Maybe that's where you need to be creative. You know, you're going to put some bike racks in there, but it just seems bad. The landscaping is just dismal. You've got some ornamental trees in the inside, but along here, this looks really actually nicer than I think it will appear when it gets done. If there can be more trees along this west side, somehow, if you could at least dress up that side of the building with better landscaping than the 3 2.5-inch caliper trees that you're proposing, be one there in that corner where the plantings and then 2 on the other corner. If there's any way, you originally had 5 there, I think. If there's any way you can do something about that, that would be more interesting. Landscaping along the bike path, or somehow connecting the bike path so it looks, and I wrote that down before I actually looked at the landscaping plan. On the back side, we have the US 36 bike path that goes past there, and it gets really close to that corner of that parking garage structure. Just like, you know, you're putting the corner, the northeast corner over the drainage, but you're right up to the US 36 bike path. And, you know, just aesthetically, that's kind of hard for me to want to deal with. But I think if you put those big trees, you have 10-foot trees for those multiple evergreens, 2 different types of evergreens along the back. So that would be good if you put at least that size in there. And they do grow fast if you irrigate them. I know. I got one that started out at 6, and now 19 years later, it's like 35 feet tall, and it's beautiful, blue spruce. No, in the northeast corner, okay. And so let me quickly look through. The setback on the 4th level, I don't like. It's only 3 feet. You might as well not have anything then. You know, that to me is, or 3 feet, whatever it is at the top. It just, this building is just, it's just a office building, a medical office building. And I think the original design was a little bit better. I don't know what to do about that, but I don't like that the 4th floor is only, is it 3 or 4 feet setback? Then I like the idea that the signs are turned off at 7 o'clock at night or 10 o'clock at the latest, because signs lit up all along, up and down the Highway 36, or shining off into the rest of, well, they wouldn't be on the back of the garage, but I personally like the fact that you're not going to be open after 7 p.m. I think that's a good idea. And it's going to be hard for people. There's a hospital right across the way, you know, so if it's people really need emergency care, they can just go over to a Vista. The garage, I heard you say is going to be, you're going to pay for it, or it's going to be privately funded. There's no public infrastructure, as far as I understand, within this building complex in the garage that's paid for through TIF or any tax financing, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And then, let's see, so, let's see, 0 setback, okay, did that. Lot B, the garage, okay, a lot of very narrow drainage signs. Okay, the signs, again, I don't mind that they're at that higher level. And I don't mind that you have signs lit along 36, as long as they're not just big obtrusive signs. And then, but on the top of the garage, on the 4th level, cannot put 15-foot high lights, poles. Absolutely cannot put on top of that 48-foot high garage, top floor, 15-foot light poles. You're gonna have to light it down within the wall, because that will be way up, and it'll look like you have a lighted tennis court or something forever, all night long, and not acceptable. And then, trash close to the bike path, I didn't like that, but you're going to hide it or screen it in some way. And not enough trees, okay, and then wall-mounted lights. Okay, wall-mounted, I wrote that down too, but they are going to be similar to what's on Boulder Valley Ice, where the wall-mounted come down. They're fine, you know, they're not bright. The Boulder Valley Ice building looks good. Okay, and then that's it. I did ask a question. How high is this, the northwest corner versus the southwest corner? How high is this building right here, from the sidewalk to the top?
I think that element is the 61 and change.
0.8 or 8 inches? Okay.
Yeah, 61, 8 inches.
Okay.
And then.
So that's the highest. Well, then inside there's some other screened elements, things that look about the same height.
Actually, you're talking about the north wall. Superior Drive drops down 4 foot. So when we have 61.8 on this corner,
yeah,
technically off of the top of that pond at the end of that building, that wall's 4 foot higher. Because the way the pump station is.
The northwest corner is 4 feet higher than this 60, that's what I asked.
That's right.
I could see
4
that.
foot difference.
So then that building wall, the northwest corner, is actually 65.8.
No, because it's not as tall as the tower.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, all right.
So it's a little bit lower, but you're correct at the elevation. It's 4 foot difference.
Yeah, okay.
If we can use an example of the prior the approval of the BVI, their tower was 57 feet. The lowest part of their street frontage, I think, is like 90, or at least, I'm sorry, floor elevation of where this building was. so 50, that's 67 foot tall overall. The MOB was 62 feet, and right next to it was 162 elevation, and then the finished floor, I think, exiting was 90. So it was actually approved at a 72 foot tall structure. So everything about what we've done here is actually less than what was prior approved.
But that is still 7 feet higher or 5 feet higher, 7 feet higher. That point there on this tower, this southwest corner here, is 7 feet higher than Boulder Valley Ice, 55 feet?
The old the center tower
Yeah.
is 57, 157,
Well, yeah, it's only
and
that
this
one
is
little tower.
61.
The
So we're
preponderance of the Boulder Valley Ice roof, the highest point is 55 along the ridge. So the tower is only one little element in the center of the building.
Exactly. And same with this. This is just one element at the corner of our building. The old medical office building that was approved attached to the BVI Center, it was 63 feet, 163. So this structure here is one and a half feet less than the prior approval.
Okay. Thank you.
Quickly, I wanted to clarify for the record, you had asked the question about financing. The parking structure is being built with private dollars, no public financing at all to build it. It's going to be conveyed to RC Superior, which is basically the entire consideration for the sale of the land. And then eventually, when that parking garage is conveyed to the district, it'll be subject to the same reimbursement agreement that all the rest of the public infrastructure is. So eventually, public dollars will, or Metro District dollars will purchase the parking garage.
Metro District dollars or TIF?
Metro District bond proceeds.
TIF cannot be used to fund a private parking structure.
It will be a public parking structure.
It's not, though, because it's for the medical office building during the day, and it's for Boulder Valley Ice after that. And so TIF cannot be used for financing the parking structure that is for private use.
The attorneys are already in tune on that, and it's how much is made public. So outside we're building more parking spaces than we're utilizing, and then on the off hours, after hours and on weekends, they utilize 100%. So
Who is they?
The district. So
The district
I think-
is not the public, though. So the district is not the public. So you need to, I won't approve an FDP that builds a private parking garage using TIF, which is public funds, tax increment financing.
None of that, those details or those agreements or those specifics are part of this application. We're very much so building a private structure as of right now. The intent is to convey it to Ranch for them to work with the district.
Well, Bill, you hear what I'm saying.
Yeah,
This is a private parking, it's not part of the Exhibit B proposed public infrastructure that would be approved through TIF, that would be approved for utilization of TIF, tax increment financing.
Yeah, and that's correct. And to Clay's point, it's built as a completely private structure. It's not financed by TIF at all. Down the road, if the parking structure is utilized for public use, actual public use, and that's certified by a third party, and it's subject to an appraiser by a third party and everything, there is a chance for TIF to finance that. But it's a discussion we can have down the road. This will be built and completely privately, and it's not. There's no guarantee of district reimbursement.
That's exactly right. If they decide that they want to do that at that point, then that's a separate discussion that we have to have with them and agree to it at that point.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we're all clear here.
Because right now,
This
no
is a
TIF money
private
being used.
structure. No TIF money can be used for, or should be used, I should say, for this.
Yeah, and if they want to have that conversation down the line with us,
And
we can
if the
have it
district
and
wants to
decide.
open it up for 100% public use or some portion, then a portion of it may be applicable to TIF, but right now, none of it is.
But that's assuming TIF is available at that time. I mean, it may not even be available. It might use it for-
Yeah.
Well, I think it's clear to know this because we only have so much money in the TIF for public parking, and it's specifically for public parking structures.
Right.
Yeah, not
We've got
private.
to, this is really disturbing to me, and I'm glad it came up because to portray it as private now and potentially public later is a ruse. If you need this parking to service the medical clientele of your office building, it's public, now and forever.
You mean
And
it's private?
I mean, private, now and forever, because the preponderance of usage will be by the private clients. And as I read, I have to say, when I read this, I got increasingly uncomfortable. In one part, in a 6-line sentence, it segues from medical to public, back to Boulder Valley Ice, back to public. And I'm like, this is just trying to write around a problem.
No.
And it really annoys me. I don't like ruses.
I need
It's private.
I need to clear the air because I'm not the expert in the matter, but I will describe everything I've been involved with and the way I understand it. Boulder Valley Ice is involved because clearly they might be the most logical recipient of the excess parking. Any excess parking, to my knowledge, the intent of the district is qualify that, appraise that, define that as public parking. However that fits within what proceeds are available, whether bond or TIF, it would be defined as the amount of hours in a day that it is dedicated to public and not used by the medical office building. So far, that's the discussions and the agreements that have been put in place or started to be drafted would be how much of it is private and when. Therefore, the balance of it would be public. And I think we're juggling the definition of is that allowed to be public? I've been in lots of public parking structures. This is the first that I've built in this nature. But a lot of public have shared parking easements and arrangements and still qualify as public.
If I can talk to this, it's private for your customers.
Correct.
And it's private for BVI's private customers.
There's no agreement to provide any parking for BVI.
The fact
right
that
now.
you're choosing BVI's, we've been down this path with BVI's. BVI's knows they have a parking need, right?
Mm-hmm.
And let's be honest about that parking need. It's for their private clients, and it's for Impact's private clients. There's a total difference between parking intended for generic public use and parking that is intended largely for private clientele of two private entities with the occasional public person who goes in and parks there. And so I find it very difficult to even proceed down this path of saying, well, tonight it's private, and that's all we've got before you tonight, knowing that in the future there is going to be some sort of machination to move it into the public realm. Because Metro District or no, if one of my questions was, which Metro District? There are going to be 3 of them in, and so which Metro District are we talking about taking this over?
I believe that's a tax question the attorneys are reviewing right now, and it's either going to be District 1 or District 2.
And who is in District 1 and who's in District 2?
It's not, you don't ask Matt because we'd have to ask the developer. It's not our districts.
Okay, well,
They're not our metro districts.
I'm asking the universe.
Yeah.
Whoever can answer it, please answer it. Who is this Metro District we're talking about?
And would this come before us at some future time?
It would have to. My understanding was the parking garage was privately funded. It might transfer to the Metro District at some point in the future for operation and maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
How does it get transferred, though?
Through an agreement with the developer and the Metro District.
But again, that's not,
Bingo.
the Metro District is
But it
not
would
the
just be for
town.
operation and maintenance.
Has
was my
nothing to do with the
understanding.
town. So just by transferring it to the metro districts of the Superior Town Center does not automatically make
Kendra,
it
go
public
ahead.
infrastructure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they can transfer it. I mean, they're free to transfer it back and forth however they want to. That does not necessarily impact the town. And you're right, we can only contribute TIF to public parking.
Right.
That said, they can allocate certain portions of that to public parking. Then we can determine whether that qualifies as public parking under the cost sharing and the development agreements and make sure that we properly allocate that. and then see if it's eligible for TIF at that time.
So we do have a say-so at some point in the future.
But the question is,
Yes.
Yes.
this manipulation potentially is really annoying me. They're the medical office building people. They build it. It's their private parking. So when they say, oh, BB Ice, we don't care if you come into this. BB Ice is a private entity. They should, in my mind, be charging BB Ice for that usage. But if they choose not to, does that BVI use of this parking facility then become public?
Only if it's not restricted. So it's all about the nature of the restrictions on the parking spaces themselves.
Yeah.
And this is a very complicated matter, and bond counsel for the special districts, in the first instance, will have to make an opinion, a legal bond opinion, that the parking is either public or private, and then they will have to literally allocate spaces, and it all gets down to the number of hours open to the public, whether it's signed, whether the signage says BVI only. If it says BVI only, that's private. If it says medical office building only, that's private. If it says medical office building only between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. after that, that's where the bond attorneys are getting, creative, I should say, because then they'll determine what percentage of that particular space is public and private, and they will get down to that level of detail to determine what's public in the parking garage and what's private.
So let's extend this. So if any part of, let any part of it becomes TIF'd, right? That then accrues to the town, correct? At some point as a public amenity.
Not
Well,
necessarily.
Not necessarily. It can
Not, especially if it's only, if it's only a portion of it, of the parking
We're not going to get
structure.
ownership of it.
No.
No, but do we have a maintenance? Let's say 40% is TIFable.
No.
And does that eventually accrue
No.
to the town as 40% responsibility for maintenance?
Well, let me ask one other question. So if
that's-
it's deeded over, or whatever the words are, to the metro district, whatever metro district, that's their responsibility for that parking garage. So who is the metro district? Who's maintaining
Whoever, the metro district will be, all the properties within that metro district will be eligible to run for the board of directors for that district. They will have a separate governing board of directors, just like you all. They'll be elected each year. Eventually. Right now, there are not enough tax-paying electors to be that, but eventually there will be.
So I have no problem if the metro district is the buildings that would likely use that garage as their parking.
Well, it's not the district, it's whether or not it's open to the public. We need to be clear here. The district, it doesn't have to be members of the district or residents of the district. If it's open to the public, and that all relates to the signage that's put in the parking garage, not the district. It really doesn't have a lot to do with the district except as far as whether it qualifies for public tax exempt
Who
bonds.
maintains it?
The district.
Right, so it matters. Maintaining a
Sure.
garage is outrageously expensive.
I didn't mean it didn't matter like that. Of course, that matters. I'm saying that that doesn't make it public versus private. If the district,
I got you.
yeah,
And
so-
it doesn't
yeah.
impact the town. The Superior
That's
Town
what we
Center,
want.
Metro Districts 1, 2, and 3 are not part of Superior Town.
Right.
Even though they say Superior Town Center in the name, they are not the town of Superior's Metro District.
Can I ask one other question? Is there any possibility that the town would take over these metro districts like, in the future, like we did for that other development, which was
It's
Rock Creek?
impossible to answer that.
The chances are slim to none. This is structurally created so differently than they were the last time, but if something terrible happens and everything goes under, I can't say definitely not, but I don't see it happening.
I would agree with that.
Okay.
So I went
And there are no plans, I think that's important. We as a town have no plans to take over at this time, the Superior Town Center or ever. At this time, we have no plans to ever take over Superior Town Center Metro Districts.
That's correct.
And on who is which, and I apologize, I'm still getting up to speed on the whole Metro District thing as well, but I know we have 3 that are set up. One of them is a blank one slated for possible future use that nothing's applied to. One of them is basically all of the residential, so the homes that you'll see tomorrow, or on the 20th, are going to be part of that first Metro District that is all the townhomes and all the residential multifamily in planning areas 2 and 3. The other one is, right now it's just Boulder Valley Ice. And so the question is which district will ultimately maintain this parking structure. We don't know yet, but one of those 2 will. And the intent right now on the non-private spaces, the spaces that are used for the medical office building will be private from 8 to 5 on Monday through Friday. There's no reimbursement, no public use of those. The rest of the
7 to
spaces,
7.
what is it?
7 to 7.
Sorry, 7 to 7.
There'll be a sign saying that.
Thank you.
No parking.
Those spaces from 7 to 10 or after 7, and all of the spaces on the weekends are open for public use with no restriction.
And that's right off the bat as soon as it's built?
Yep.
Got
Well,
it.
that's not what it said in our documents that we received tonight, so I just wanted.
It is what it said.
No, it said that it would primarily, substantially be for Boulder Valley Ice. It would be for, it says that in there.
He said most likely they'll use it.
No, that's not the way it says, but
Well,
here's
and-
the thing for
And
me.
to clarify, right now, that's probably the case because Boulder Valley Ice is the only other use on the property. Once there's 200,000 square feet of retail, I wouldn't say the same thing.
I would say the people that are in the town square are more likely to use that parking structure than Boulder Valley Ice, which is on the opposite side.
Yeah, exactly. Boulder Valley's main entrance is on the south side where their parking
Right.
garage
There's
or
potentially
parking
another one over
lot
there.
is, yeah. And there's potential to build a structure down there for Boulder Valley Ice, which is their main entrance down there.
But if
I
that
think-
parking
I think
structure
we're
is
talking
full,
about 2 years, though, before we get anything downtown in the town square or town center, whatever the hell we're calling it these days, but in the plaza area. It would be 2 years before we get anything down there. So in the meantime, this structure, and that's why I brought it up. I asked a question of several people today, and I thought I had the right answer, but now we're hearing a different answer. So I want to be clear from what I was told today from staff, and from what I understand about TIF. This structure that you are privately financing now, parking structure, will be private for the foreseeable future, because the only people using it are the tenants of the medical office building and the Boulder Valley Ice building. Now, what happens in the future? So I just want you to be aware from our side of the table how we see it.
Mhm.
There's no expectation that I can see that parking structure will be paid for in the near term through, or approved to be paid for through TIF financing, tax increment financing, because it is not a public structure
Mhm.
as
Right.
we define it, as the town
Right.
of Superior defines it.
The transaction to date, I think that's what you're bringing up is a separate item. It's important, and myself and more Ranch, because it's Ranch's concept with the district, to whether it's TIF or not TIF, to convey it to the district, are working on that now. I've been on a couple meetings with the district attorney. They're reviewing the taxes and the various reasons which district it would be. I can tell you with confidence that the only agreement right now is between Ranch and between Ranch and ourselves, where the MOB would be restricted as outlined in the staff report. And there aren't any other restrictions. And from what I've heard and the way I understand it, thank you, Kendra, for being more technical, because I think this is an attorney answer, and for those that know it better, the case law would be the definition of what makes it public. And the signage and us being restricted for our hours for the MOB is all that I know. BVI, while they might be the most natural public user, being adjacent, and their tenants are coming, their customers are coming to that most immediate building, would most likely utilize that public parking. Will it be charged parking? To be determined. All these are to be determined public type parking garage decisions.
I understand what you're
but
saying.
I just don't want anyone to feel or paint the picture that the developer, as applicant, providing this proposal, is trying to pull a roost. Because yes, we're building a private structure. That's the agreement that I have with Ranch, is to build a private structure that is for our parking.
Okay, thank you. And I just wanted full disclosure from our side, too. This is not viewed, I do not view it, and I don't believe anybody else should view it here, as a public parking structure.
That's not what we're discussing today. I would agree with that.
And quickly too, because I very much don't want to go down the road of looking like we're trying to pull a fast one or anything. That's why I came up and brought this up in the first place. The intent is ultimately, whether it's once the town center is built out or whatever, that the public parking in the structure will be financed with TIF money as a reimbursement, just like the rest of the public infrastructure. And that, this is the first time this is coming up, and I don't want to let it go this time and then come back later and have it be a
Chris and I have had our hands up for a while, so we need to get some.
I want Bill to stay up though, because there's going to be some follow-up. Go ahead.
And to finish up, but I don't want to get too derailed for this, because again, for this FDP, that's not an issue at all. That's a future issue that we'll deal with when the parking structure is slated to be conveyed to the district. Right now, it's a completely private parking structure that's financed privately. No TIF dollars are involved.
Okay, Elia?
I just had a very quick question for Matt. In terms of timing, will this parking lot be built before the one BVI's parking lot?
Absolutely.
No,
The
I just want to
structure?
know the timing.
The
Yes.
structure?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like
The parking
by-
lot on Lot 3, which is south of
Right.
that building, will be constructed this summer. I mean,
Surface.
it'll be surface parking, but the structure, I couldn't tell you when.
So okay, got it.
Right, that's
Chris,
correct.
go ahead. That's all I have.
So just a couple questions then. There is a planned parking structure behind the town square, correct? And that's a public structure, and that is going to be paid for through TIF.
Yeah, when that comes forward, that's one of the discussions we'll have, yep.
Okay, so
That's
when we
correct.
have that discussion, the board at the time, whenever that happens, the board has to say, yes, we're gonna go ahead with that, and we're gonna approve TIF dollars for that.
Correct.
And there's no other way that can be done without the board's approval to approve
Correct.
the TIF dollars.
Yep.
So the same thing with this structure here. If it's say 5 years from now, the attorneys or the owners or whatever want to make this a public structure, it
What's
still
the
has to-
process?
It still has to come to the board, and the board says, okay, yeah, we're going to approve TIF dollars to pay a portion of that.
Well, those are two separate issues. They can make it a public structure anytime they want to by transferring it to the district and opening it up to the public.
Okay, so
But the
hold on,
TIF
wait, don't, so once they say, okay, we're gonna make this 100% public structure, that doesn't automatically qualify for TIF dollars.
No, and I don't think they could, Stephen can correct me, but I don't think they can make it completely public without any dedicated parking because they need to fulfill their own parking requirements.
Understood.
So
Yep.
they can make a portion of it public, but that does not mean they automatically get TIF for it.
Okay, so that's my point, is that I don't think that this is a ruse at all, because at some point, it's gotta come to the board for a discussion, and somebody, the board has to approve some kind of reimbursement, so there's no way it could happen, there's no way TIF could pay for this without the board's approval, correct?
The process to get TIF, public infrastructure reimbursed is the developer sends the expenditures that they've made, like they're doing
Right.
today, for putting in the sewer and the electrical and all that, and they submit it to staff, and they submit it to our independent engineer auditor, and collectively then those two staff, town staff, and the auditor look at it and compare, the third-party auditor, engineer auditor, look at it to determine, is it eligible for TIF reimbursement? And if it is, then it's marked as approved, and we have that in our Dropbox every so many months. We get a new one of those.
But it doesn't come before the board.
It never
for
comes
a
before the
vote.
board.
It
No.
wouldn't come before, that's what I was just about to say, is it wouldn't come before the board, but it would be treated like any other expenditure that's eligible for TIF. It has to come to the town for approval, and we have the independent process to
Right.
make sure that it's TIF eligible.
Right.
So it would first have to be public, then come to the town for approval with other eligible costs under
Right.
the cost-sharing agreement.
But
Right.
not the town board.
No.
Not the
That's
board.
clear when you say
No.
the town.
Right,
No.
not the board.
The only structure, Lot 3 of Block 12, which is on the south end, that will eventually come before us as a new FDP for a new parking structure. And then we can determine at that time what portion of it may be, on our mind, public versus private use. And then it'll go, after it's spent, the money is spent, through, and its money is either the individual investors or the bonds that they've already let through the metro districts, then we'll come and pay for that parking structure, and then it'll come forward through this process that we just described, to staff and to the independent engineer auditor to determine whether or not it is eligible for reimbursement.
Sure.
Right, so that's the way it works.
Yep.
I am totally uncomfortable with this. I do appreciate that you've declared the intention. I appreciate you being upfront about that. But I don't appreciate that not being explicitly addressed in the narrative provided, I think, by the developer or by medical office building personnel. And I do not particularly appreciate this not being heads-on addressed in the staff memo.
Well, it wasn't addressed in staff, because that wasn't my understanding.
Okay, so you have a different understanding
My
now?
understanding was privately funded, turned over to the Metro District at some point for operation and maintenance only.
Okay, well, that's more akin to what this says, although I'm going to read you 6 lines from page 3 out of the 19-page cover memo. It's the last paragraph on page 3, starting on line 4. The project narrative explains that the medical office building will have exclusive rights to the parking spaces it needs within the parking garage during their business hours, that the remaining spaces will be public, and that all 244 spaces within the parking garage will be open to the public after scheduled medical office hours, with the Boulder Valley Ice Facility to the immediate south as the primary beneficiary of this shared parking arrangement. Now that is not a well-constructed sentence unless it is meant intentionally to be obtuse.
Let me qualify it then. The shared parking arrangement would only be for the MOB and those restricted parking spaces that I need and that the city needs to meet the requirement. We actually exceed the requirement, but it's a market need. Beyond that, it would be the intention to be public.
Yes, but with a
the
major
district-
private entity having access to those public
And
spots.
I think I think that was a function more of the existing development and the way that it's foreseen to be used for the next year or two, which is true, because right now, of course, it will be mostly BVI using the public spaces. In the future, that would change, and that's probably where that sentence
Would it?
fell down. Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Well, I know, but like would it, practically, would that parking structure not, if there was a heavy use, lots of cars from BVI, would they park there or somewhere else in the plaza in town
Well,
center?
park
I guess is my
closest.
question.
Closest to where they need to go.
That's all. So when we say beneficiary, or I mean, ultimately, I would feel like there's an argument that could be made that most likely BVI would use that public parking spaces predominantly than others, but it's not meant to be private or restricted to them.
Yeah.
I think we just need to make
You
that clear
understand that.
distinction.
Let me give you a little bit of critical background to this little wall that's building up between us. Back when we had the BVI's FDP to consider, BVI's tried, I don't know if it was Ranch Capital or BVI's who did this, but we were presented with a FDP that had a parking garage as part and parcel of that FDP, similar to this. Big BVI's and that parking garage. That was largely going to be used, 90% used for private purposes because they've got hours of 5 a.m. to 3 a.m., right?
1 a.m.
Or 1 a.m., you get the point. 5 a.m. to 1 a.m., and they were calling it a public garage that they wanted the town to eventually own and maintain. And the only way that FDP proceeded forward is when they agreed to pull that parking garage out of the whole FDP for it to be considered separately when and if it ever was presented in the future. Because it was offensive to say something that's used 20 hours a day for private purposes should then be on the public dime, okay? So you're getting in the middle of all this sort of unwittingly.
Yeah, but they're
okay?
innocent, though. That's not what they're doing.
But it is a little bit of what's happening because of the future intention. If the future intention, Bill, if I heard you right, the future intention is to make it tippable and to make it public.
Portion of it, yes.
Huh?
The public portion of it that's not dedicated
Right.
for medical office.
And you
building, yes.
understand how that public portion can be manipulated. So when you have at 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. as private, and it on Monday through Friday, and it becomes vacant for public use, even if one public car doesn't park in there, simply that vacancy on those off work hours renders it public for certain math equations in terms of what part is available for public use, even though it's not used for public.
And again, this isn't part of the FDP, but we've started to have those discussions with bond counsel and with a third-party parking appraiser who typically does work with metro districts and public dollars. You know, the argument is always, what's the public, what are the hours that you consider? Do you consider all 24 hours? Because a parking space from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. isn't necessarily used by a whole lot of public, even though it's public.
Right.
And so typically in those calculations, you'll leave out the midnight hours that no one's using it. But you might get public credit for if someone's parking there between 7 p.m. and 10 p.m. or starting at 7 a.m. the next day, and certainly the weekends when the retail is very busy and everything else is very busy, there will be a huge parking demand here that this will satisfy. And so, it's again, the intent is not at all to be sly or underhanded about
I
it.
buy
And,
that, Bill, exactly what you're saying, but I don't buy it in the context of BVI's.
Mhm.
If you're using it 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. private, and they're using it from 7 p.m. to
2 a.m.
2 a.m., 1 a.m., whatever it is, private intent, but they qualify sort of under public because they're not you guys, that isn't copacetic with me.
Yeah, I think it's a question we might have to revisit in a different forum.
I just
To
want
me,
to.
it's still private.
I think I want to
It's
close it
qualifies as
by.
public.
There's a whole type of law. I mean, this is what
Right.
bond attorneys do, and they sit down and they sit there with calculations and percentages and they figure it out. And it's been upheld by courts as to how much is public and how much is private.
Right.
And that will be their job to do. That's the
But
way.
when they're not fully apprised of what BVI is and stuff, whatever, what can we do tonight to word a condition that says when this situation comes forth in which the developer intends to make it tiffable, that it must come back to the town board for consideration?
Well, what we may want to do is, in this case, perhaps what we do is add a condition that says, even under the cost-sharing agreement, when this particular expense, if this particular parking garage comes back for TIF, that it actually comes to the board rather than just going to the independent. It would go to the independent third-party appraiser, adjuster, whatever we're calling that person or firm first. But then that it also takes another step to come to the board to make sure the board agrees that it is a TIFable, I'll call that, a TIFable expense, and that the calculations are correct. That would be one thing that we could do, if that's what the board desires.
And I just want to, I think that's probably a good, I think that's, my reason for bringing this up was because I want to be very, I'm not opposed to saying some portion of it is public if it truly is. But we need to know that we have to follow, I want a full disclosure with you, Clay, because we have to follow the procedure that we have in place. We're just not going to take it. It can't be just assigned to Metro District and all of a sudden assumed that 100% of it is public and TIFable. I mean, we keep saying that
I don't think
dumb
that's
word.
what they're saying, though. They're not saying that.
No, they're not saying that, but what it appeared like that. I just want to make sure that we're clear that there's some portion might be, but it won't be a very big portion.
And it would still have to go through the same vetting process.
And it have to go through the same process.
That all other eligible costs have to go through to get TIF funds. But what I'm saying is if you want to add an additional step here, and if the applicant's willing, that's certainly a condition that we could add tonight that says, we're going just for this one particular parking garage, because it's unclear, right now it's private, that we want that additional step later if it is converted to public use, that we want that additional step. I don't know how the applicant feels about that, but.
What I'm hearing is that the condition should probably be that if there's any restricted parking, that wouldn't count for public.
Well, that automatically will happen through the process.
Okay. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
that's the only concern, I think.
The
What I
concern-
hear you guys saying is that you think that someone is putting a shared parking arrangement with BVI, and I know of no such arrangement, at least right now. I'm not setting that up with.
No, but the reality is that that at least for the
de
next
facto.
12 to 24 months at least, it's pretty much going to be BVI. And that's just obvious. What happens after that as the town plaza gets built out? Obviously, it's going to be more mixed, but.
Well, I mean, but that's a philosophical. So what do you do at a parking structure that's right up against Nordstrom's? It's public, but Nordstrom's are going to use it right there. So
Yeah,
I
as
mean,
long
if
as it's
that's
not-
a philosophical problem with BVI parking there, then.
If it's not signed for BVI only, it's public. Or
Right.
If,
Okay, so
if
that's-
BVI, even if BVI uses every single space, but it's not signed to restrict it to BVI, it's still considered public. I'm just telling you what the law is. I understand that.
So to answer your
I
question,
think-
Kendra, that was a condition I felt more comfortable with.
I think
That's-
Kendra's condition makes sense to me.
Right.
Yeah, and
I'm
I
okay
think if
with
you
that,
can
too.
follow through with that, if you think Matt, that you can follow up with that 2 years or 3 years from now?
You said
And we'll
you're
be
not
able to
comfortable with
Well,
act.
it's just not, I'm not the master plan developer, so this is a condition on parking structure that are building is private, so it's kind of a,
Well, the only condition is really that after the determination has been made, first of all, the Metro District, if they receive, when they receive the parking structure from you all, then the Metro District will come and submit those expenditures for the building of that parking structure to the,
Only if they're gonna be TIF.
That's right.
well, I'm saying, if they want to then put some portion of it as public, what they would do next is bring it to staff. Staff would send it to the independent auditor that we're using at the time. And then, once it's been reviewed and determined that 15.6% of it is, or whatever percentage, is approved as public TIF reimbursable to the Metro District. Then what Sandy's asking for and what Kendra suggested is that final review that says 15% of it is TIFable should come back for review, which is basically just to show the board that this portion actually got done. That's what they're saying. That's
I'm
the
all for
condition.
transparency, but again, the only reason why I was suggesting my condition is because it's not my.
Yeah, quite honestly, it affects us more than.
Right, that's what I'm saying. It affects you at the Metro District.
So
Yeah.
in the interest of complete transparency, I'm fine bringing it back to the board so you can see it. Again, I want to reiterate that we are definitely going to bring it back to the board, and these spaces that are public will be considered public
Well, then I think
as reviewed by a third-party appraiser and everything.
Well, I
Jason.
think that's fair because let's, for the parking garage in the Town Center Plaza area.
Yep.
At the time that comes forward with an FDP, we'll have these calculations for the board to review and
Right.
have input on. So,
Right.
yeah, I think that makes sense.
So I still have one question for staff, Kendra.
Yes.
Bill, whoever. So let's say, using Rita's calculation, that 16% eventually is deemed TIFable. What are the implications for that on the town of Superior?
None.
No, none.
You mean deemed public?
Deemed TIFable.
Yeah,
Well, then-
public
then-
infrastructure
then
that could be approved for
If
reimbursement.
they're asking for a TIF reimbursement, then that will be part of the TIF reimbursement.
Okay, but what are the long-term implications? Does that mean the town?
Can we turn on the lights? I'm sorry.
Budget then must absorb 16% of the long-term maintenance of this parking garage?
No.
We have no obligation to maintain the
No,
parking.
but what it really means is later down the road, when we do decide to build a completely 100% public structure, we may not have the funds
Enough
for
TIF
it.
funds.
Enough TIF funds.
Right.
True. It comes out of the TIF funds, so.
That's what point Chris was trying to make.
And that's something else we're also working on is based on the draft plan that's developing for the rest of the town center, looking at a budget for all the other parking structures and comparing that to the actual revenue. And
What
seeing
is the average
where we-
cost, like the one Chris described behind Town Square? Isn't it like $25 million to build a parking garage?
$17,000 a space for above-ground parking
So
structure.
how much is that?
If it's 100 spaces, then it's 1.7 million. If it's 500 spaces, then it's 5 times that. It's per 17,000 per parking space times however many parking spaces you have. So we'll be doing, and it's not just the parking structures, it's the landscaping and the new bricks that we're putting on the road and everything else. We're doing an overhaul of the entire budget, and I'll have that in the next month or two.
You
we'll have a better
understand
idea.
the huge implications of this? here.
Absolutely,
It's
yeah.
not a minor thing.
No, absolutely.
Right.
Okay, it sounds like we've gotten a good, sounds like we've had a good discussion on that, but also a good,
Resolution.
a good condition that gives us comfort that it's going to come back to us, and we've got some accountability to that. Okay, further questions
Yeah, just
from the board
yeah,
to?
a couple that-
Okay.
Very incidental compared to that. The urgent care, I disagree with Rita on that, and agree with Ela that it should actually, I think it should be open later in the day, especially right next to Boulder Valley Ice. There's hockey games going on all the time throughout the night, so I think it makes sense to have it open. But then when the town square is open and bustling and all that, I think that it makes sense to have it open a little bit later than 7 p.m. And then Cornerstone Orthopedics, is that what's going in there? And is it just?
Yes.
No,
Second
they're
floor.
not. That's what they're
No,
called.
second
No,
floor.
it's not them.
They are the
No.
second floor.
Yeah, it's
Cornerstone's on the second floor, yeah.
Yeah, Cornerstone Orthopedics. right?
Cornerstone's not gone.
But they're not calling that it anymore. Yeah, they might be, some of them are.
Cornerstone
They are the
is on your
tenant on the second floor.
Yeah, okay.
Some
It
of
does-
them.
Yes, I'm sorry, yes.
Yeah, he just
It's
said
an
it on
orthopedic
this one.
surgeon, or,
Yeah.
is it just their offices, or are they having medical visits there? Are they gonna do any surgeries there or anything like that, or is it just, or do you know?
I'd have to, I don't believe there's surgeries there, but there might be some for minor injuries. But it's not like an ER room at all. So I think it's they'll access the hospital for when they need to do that.
So over at Vista or whatever, on the end, they have that,
Yeah.
that surgical center. Okay, yeah, okay.
I just want to make a comment about that. I don't think that we can say that we'd like to have an urgent care open, but I think it's really up to them in the marketplace to determine.
Well,
Yeah, that.
and that's what I was going to suggest.
Yeah.
We can't make a condition that we do open the doors for that long, but what's smart here, the board is recommending that that's what you'd like to see.
Yeah.
That's what
And
we're
I-
doing.
and
We're
I'll-
not making
and
a
I'll-
condition.
and-
That's what we're doing.
Oh, that's
Right,
definitely
no.
not a condition, no.
Right, so
It's
I
a
can't-
recommendation. We just had an event last night where one of the players had to go get checked out. And
So
it was
let
at
me look
9
into
o'clock
it.
at night, so I think it makes sense.
I
that-
completely agree. So let
I'd
me-
rather have them stay here in town than go
Right.
Well, you don't
somewhere
want to
else.
go to an emergency room for 6 hours when you can see
That's
somebody
Right.
at urgent care in 45
Get back
minutes.
on the ice.
And 10 p.m. is very late in the game.
So let me look into it and I get back to you. So I think what's practical is if you
That's why urgent
can, if
care
you can, whatever hour you're willing to, up to midnight or something, I'll look to
Up
see
to
what they're
midnight would be
willing to
great.
do.
We can.
I think that makes sense. And maybe we tie that to the signage too, so.
Yeah.
It really gets down to, though, what, doctors and how you would staff it and stuff. We can say, we might like it, but it's really up to you all,
That's what I was making
Yeah.
right now, I think it's talking about business hours and maybe because it came from us, right?
Yeah, right.
But if we,
Done.
just, if we note, and maybe it's not even a condition, but just note that it can be open till 12 and coincides with the lit signs along 36, if that's what
That makes
we're
sense.
discussing, then we'll certainly look to do that.
Yeah, if someone's driving around 11:30 looking for an urgent care, and they see a sign.
Well, the problem is, you have a lot of problems with how you pay for it and whether it's really an emergency room or an urgent care. And
Well-
if you pay 4 times what you would if you went to the one that's approved by there gets all kinds of
And
other problems
That's
with that.
personal decisions.
Yeah, and that's up to the tenant, but having the flexibility to do so is what we're deciding here.
Okay, my my 3 things that I think we need to know whether they're going to be a condition or if it's going to be changed is, one is no poles on top of the parking structure for lighting. That can't happen. So I don't know if that has to be a condition or if it needs to, if that's considered a minor change, or how would that be?
No, we should make that a condition if that's.
Right. You can't
Well,
have.
I'd like to talk about that, because there's,
Yeah.
for a life safety, you have to meet a certain foot candle. And wall packs or something down low wouldn't, the cars and the people and other things would impede that. So the only thing would be the height of the lighting and the type of hood. And I think that maybe you can address what was chosen. I think that it is all hooded and
It's going to look like a great big, on top of a hotel, like in
Why
the
can't you
urban
close
centers.
the top floor at night? This is going to be, your office is going to be closed. You don't need it. You have 3 other floors to fill. Why can't you just close that, put a barrier up?
Well, but there could be Boulder Valley Ice usage. I mean, there could be
Market.
I
people
just
that
can-
need to use the
Right,
parking
right.
spaces. It seemed like I read something in the packet about that there was a reduction to the foot candles of
Yeah, but-
lighting, so
but-
that it was minimal, but
No,
net-
you're
but
looking
net
out,
needs.
Clint, I'm gonna look right out at that from my second level, and I will see that every time I look out there, it will be that parking lot and on the 4th level will be lit up all night long. Now, if you turn the lights off at 10, I'll be fine with that, but you can't leave them on and all night long. I won't, it's just not a good idea. So
Plus,
it's,
her house is probably lower. Is it lower? Will you be looking up into that hood from where you, from?
no, I'll probably
that
be
area?
looking right at it,
Right at
He
straight at
doesn't
it.
look up at anything.
I do to Longs Peak. I look up to Longs Peak, so, But it's just not even just for me, I don't want it to
Well,
be,
maybe
but
speak to the brightness and what we can expect.
it's
out
not
there.
that. It's that you're going to light it up like a field, like a parking lot that's going to be lit day and night.
No, the question is it is it a car lot, or is it something much more subdued, so that it's not looking like a football field? I mean, there's different ways to light things, and I defer to them for the answer. I don't know the answer.
Well, we did, we reduced the foot candles, after the last review with Stephen. And, it becomes a safety issue if we're just trying to put them on the walls of the parking structure, because it won't light it properly. Just putting it on a 4-foot wall, even a light that throws out, once a car's parked there, it doesn't do anything. It's not going to work. We need to have some type of poles up there. If we're going to use them at
15
night.
foot on top of a 48
Let him finish. Let him finish the
But
point.
you
Let him
heard the
finish the
answer.
point.
So
Okay,
what's a
but-
different option?
Joe, why does it, is it Joe?
I could- I could
Why does it
reduce
have to
the
be
height, so.
15 feet? Why can't it be 8 feet?
Well, that's just for the photometrics to make sure that we had the coverage. If it gets too low,
You add more.
what ends up happening is we get these hot spots, and then we get spots that there's no light. So, we reduce the lights as it is already, the wattage on them, but we need to keep that light up to get it to spread.
And are there shields and things
Yes.
on the
Yeah,
sides of the
there's-
fixture so that it's
Mhm.
so that
Yeah,
it's
so that it's
directing
a
the light,
downlight. Yes.
so that it's directing the light onto the surface of that
Yes.
and not everywhere else?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes, it is.
dark sky compliant. I mean, I've heard those terms. Is that
It is.
okay?
But if you look up, yes, it's going to be a light pole. It will be up there, and it'll have a fixture on it, but it will be downlight.
Yeah.
But if you look at, as it is right now, there's some spots that aren't very bright already, so.
Will it give the appearance that there's like tennis courts up there? Do you know what I mean by that?
No, it won't look that bright.
Okay.
It won't look that bright.
How many square feet is that upper level?
Well, it's half of it's open, so we're only really doing, a little bit over half of the structure is what we're
So how many
lighting.
square feet is that?
About 9.
Uh,
It's 16 total, isn't it?
Yeah, it's probably about 9,000.
So each of those lights is illuminating 1,500 square feet at 7 lights?
Yes, basically.
Right, so they're not minimal. I get the point. I mean, I think out of our haste and how we get in these things, we're trying to minimize a concern here. A light that's intended to illuminate 1,500 square feet is not an insignificant light.
Well, that might be, but if you look at the photometrics that we're prepared for, you're averaging like 2.2, 2.3. You've got some 0.3, 0.2s also.
That's minimal.
That's
One is-
minimal. I mean, that's really, if we go anything less than that, I don't know why we put the lights up there, to be quite truthful.
I think Rita'd be happy if you didn't.
Well, she might be, but you know what, for public safety.
Well, I've been in a lot of parking garages that are really dark. And on the top floors, even at CU, when I go to basketball games and park on that top level, there aren't that many lights up there.
Well, we're at 0.3, 0.1, that's dark.
Yeah.
Well, if
That's-
there's an example too, maybe we can study what that is and
I just
and try
wa-
to implement that.
I mean, your
Just-
code is 5-foot candles, we're at 0.1, 0.2. We're so far below your code of what you wanted, your
It's-
maximum.
It's not the code, it's the ability to see that top of that parking garage over above Boulder Valley Ice Building even, and to see that big expanse. The
Right.
parking garage is 50% bigger even than the medical office building, and I don't know, you said half of it is only lit on the top floor, the fourth
Mhm.
floor? But even then, it's still a big surface area that's going to be lit up. And, when people, several of us here even, look down at that, and that's why there's height limits and restrictions and lighting, that lights coming down on the walls of the Boulder Valley Ice Building and this medical office building are fine,
Mhm.
because they go down to the ground. But when you're lighting up a great big 10,000 square foot expansive area, and that's all lit up, that's going to be pretty bright, visible, I should say, visible at all night long. And then the lights will be on all night, right? All night long? 24 hours a day.
They can be, or they could be set on a timer.
Or at least where half of them go out, alternating.
Yeah, I mean, they don't need to be on. I mean, there's probably a point that
Well, it's just an issue to have 15-foot high poles on top of a 48-foot structure.
That's not an issue for everybody, just so we're clear here. That's just so we're clear. I'd rather safety trumps 5 feet or 15 feet, just so we're.
Okay, let's go through you had a couple of ideas for
Okay, I don't want it to
conditions.
sound like
Let's
that's
go through
we're all agreeing
those.
on this.
And then the other was the setback at the top on the 4th level of the building. Is there any further discussion about it being 10 feet like it was, or something more than the 4 feet or 3 feet that's been proposed?
It's only 3 feet on one side. And going back to 2012, I mean, we had very long discussions on how high to allow the buildings and the reason to go to that 4th story. And I think even there's a potential for a 5th story now, or even a 6th. How tall is that one hotel that was finally approved? But you get the point. The stories 4th and above have to be recessed, that 10 feet, so as to allow sun and whatnot in. My fear is just as happened here tonight. We allowed some exceptions for Boulder Valley Ice, and tonight we've heard about them. Well, you've allowed Boulder Valley Ice to do this, and we're not asking much more. If we do not require the recess on this building, this is going to become the precedent for future buildings. I just want to make people aware of that. Now, I think there's a fundamental case not to have to recess that eastern wall against the parking garage. Other than I'd sort of like to have my wall recessed by 10 feet if I had that office there. I'd like to have a little more sunshine, but I can accept that east wall not being recessed by 10 feet. I wish the heck the west wall were recessed by 10 feet, because I do believe what's looking here to be a nice little street is really going to be somewhat of an alleyway feeling. And if you recess that west wall, is everybody with me? I'm directionally challenged.
Or the south?
Talking about the-
You mean in the, yes.
The south, I mean.
The south,
If
yeah.
you recess this by 10 feet, it's just going to make it that much brighter down here. And by keeping it unrecessed, especially given how close, how wide is that road there?
Yeah, 80.
That's over 70 feet between the buildings.
So what's your experience with that in terms of shade and sunlight?
I mean, that faces south. I mean, backing that up is going to do nothing for adding more light in there. I mean, it's facing south.
Well, this is why I like shade and sun studies, because I don't know that. You're a developer, Clint, you know these things. So say again what your opinion of that is.
I think it's fine, because
Why?
because backing it up, it's only going to be visually different. It's not going to do anything for more light. The sun is coming from that direction, and it's moving, to the west. So I mean, it's tracking across the southern sky from the east.
I'm just
to the
having to
west.
take your word or my Eagle Scout
So-
husband's word on this, because I'm
I mean,
totally illiterate on sun patterns,
I mean, the north side is the cold side. I mean,
right?
that side is going to be fine, and that's the active side. So I think it's fine.
What about on this west side with just a 3-foot articulation?
Well, that's-
Again, I
That's
mean,
where
this.
there was a patio, and I'll just speak to this, that we did, after contractors that did all the pricing, for us to be able to move forward, we did a study based on the amount of floor area and the cost, and the parking structure is no help here, unfortunately, but that's
Right.
that's the nature of the beast that we have in front of us. The patio was not something that the tenants demanded. It was not something that we could afford, and the square footage was quite the opposite. It made the project be able to move forward. So
Okay.
we did work with Bill to undulate around the building all 4 sides, some more step back than just a small little patio with a double door that was
Right.
there on the last project. Granted, this is less, but I think there's more setback throughout the project.
Well, the rest of my sentence was going to be on this side. I don't care on the north. I don't care on the east. I thought I cared here until Clint explained that the sun's going to hit it the exact same way. And I do care here.
Well, the sun's going to hit that in the afternoon, and you know.
So what are we going to do in that 6-story building?
I think, in my mind, the vertical and the horizontal articulation is what I'm hopeful is what you see that we tried to accomplish. So that if we need to analyze sun more, but I think that to really get a huge sun impact, you're talking about stepping the building, either taking the 4th level off or stepping it way back.
Well, that's what 10 feet was. We didn't select 10 feet. That was selected by people who know shade and sun.
I don't think 10 feet would add much sun to the ground floor.
I'm not hearing a chorus of people concerned about it up here, so I'm prepared to give it up if nobody else is concerned about it.
Yeah, that was one of my concerns because the building directly to the west is up to 75 max height, 75 feet up to. So
65,
well, actually,
unless it's a hotel.
If it's that hotel, it's 75.
Yeah.
only in this one little strip, though.
Yeah.
So the other strip could be higher. So, and then the other side, or in block 7, I'm sorry, I can't see in here, block 7 as well. I know I'm looking at an old one, but I know that this is still correct. So that, there's other reasons besides the design standards to consider a 10-foot setback than a 3-foot. So, I mean, I think design standards are important to go by, since that is what we've put in there for obvious many different reasons. But the building in front of it, to the west, could be problematic for your building. Something to consider.
But that's to be determined. I mean, we can't.
Well, I mean,
we can't make decisions on this based on something we don't know. I'm happy with it the way it is. I'm not interested in
I want to, if I
redesigning.
can finish going through, I share the concern of having a primary face of this building on Superior Drive and having what is sort of a confusing entrance situation. It made me even more concerned when you showed me those 2 doors, one to the electrical room and one to something else. If this goes forth, I would hope we would have some way to camouflage those and make them look like something more important than electrical room doors. Rita said this somewhat in jest, but I actually think it may be worth considering. We're not struggling for ample parking because of your parking garage, and the question is possibly giving up some of the diagonal parking here to add more green along here that a 0 setback cannot give. So is anybody else interested in adding more green along that?
I'm not. I think that a building like this, you're going to need, you're going to be glad that you've got that parking there. I think the way they've presented the awnings and the signage, it presents itself as an inviting entrance. I think once people get to know this building, they'll know where to go. I mean, anytime you visit a new, big, multi-tenant office building, you don't have a clue where to go in. You don't have a clue where you're going inside. But once you go, you usually figure it out. And so, yeah, it'll be confusing the first time people go, but then the second time they're going to beeline it back for that parking garage. They're going to go in, they're going to walk across the second deck and right into their office, and they're going to be happy. And it's not going to matter what the corner looks like. I think it would be a mistake to flip the primary entrance to this corner, have people park in the back, and then they got to haul themselves with orthopedic injuries to the corner, only to have to backtrack all the way back. I mean, that makes no sense.
Yeah, well, that's not how it would work. I mean, I go to many buildings that have primary and secondary entrances, and they both allow great circulation within the building.
If I could, there will not be a door here at this location. It will not be confused as an entry. this grade falls away. This will be secondary in nature, and perhaps might just have that tenant sign and further signage to keep people from going in there. It's not grand because it doesn't have a public lobby or the elevators, but this can be quite grand for any retailer type or user. The tenant can quite easily make that a very nice entry. So I think for that large user, that's a great entry. The main access point is, as the mayor has pointed out, quite appropriately, I think, located with our parking.
Okay. A question came up earlier about Cornerstone, and after that, Dr. Sheen walked in, and I wanted to give him an opportunity. If you'd like, you don't have to, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but if you want to give a little update on what Cornerstone's presence was going to be in the building, I think that would be useful for the board and the public to hear.
Hi, Joe Sheen, Cornerstone Orthopedics. Yeah, Cornerstone has committed to this building actually a long time ago when we started this project, and committed to take the whole second floor. And we were the ones originally who got the project going, and of course tried to fill the first floor with urgent care and an imaging facility. And we originally had many leases at least looked at by other tenants in the building. So, but it all kind of fell apart with kind of the PIF numbers affecting the lease rates. So we weren't really able to move forward with our project, and Sawtooth came along and graciously has been working hard at this. So our presence there is such that it's still consistent with the mission that we had originally when we kind of brought this to the town, in that we wanted to make the Superior Town Center a kind of a health and wellness destination, and all that we do with the sports stable impact, as well as the center. And we have a lot of great things in mind for it. So we're really looking forward to it, and we have a lot vested in it, not just financially, but unfortunately our lease is up at our old facility, and we've been getting extensions month by month, and then now year by, or 6 month by 6 month, and we're in hopes of getting it as soon as we can. So we are very anxious in trying to get our practice in here and growing it, and so we're hoping that this goes through.
Great, thank you. Thanks.
And just going through my list, I support also, if you can work it out, having urgent care, and I use the word urgent very specifically, not emergent, urgent care,
right, okay.
Because of the difficulty patients are having distinguishing between the two. I'm talking urgent, cheaper, not a substitute emergency room that's
No, it
billed
is
at
not.
emergency rates.
That's correct.
So I'd like to have it open at least 10 p.m. and some people say midnight, but whatever you can make happen. I am struck by the basically you have half the plantings accounted for that the design guidelines require, and I'd like to see us as a board establish right now with these first projects a payment in lieu for plantings that do not occur, because we will have quite a need for all of our parks to plant them out, and like that. So I would actually like there to be a financial contribution or payment in lieu when applicants don't meet the landscape requirement.
Well, two reasons why that landscape requirement doesn't look as good as it is this lot split, number one, so it changes the percentages between. So we gracefully ask that you look at the project as a whole, because the only reason for the lot split is because of the conveyance. The reason need for zero lot line is, I think it's 100% because of the parking structure. If we could surface park or didn't need to provide that surplus parking that's very expensive, we would be meeting it, absolutely. So that's that is the difference, and I hope that we can see
Why
that
are
difference.
you doing such a big parking structure when you don't require that much? You just require, what, 188 out of 200 and, what's your parking requirements versus the number of spots in the garage?
I think we're about 30 or 40 extra in
Just
the
30 or
parking
40?
structure. So it's not significant, but it's a function of trying to provide more parking
Okay.
that we talked about earlier.
Perhaps this site does have odd requirements because of the lot split in terms of
Yes.
landscaping. I don't understand that, and if Stephen can quickly explain what's
And then
happened
if
here
I could
because
add,
of the lot
because you
split.
made me realize that I didn't finish too, was the fact that we abut open space and landscaping areas like the detention area and the open space. It's going to be not built out on both sides, to the north and the east.
Stephen, town staff. I guess the only thing I'd clarify, and it's probably easier to clarify on the landscape plan, is that, so they don't have foundation plantings to the west for the medical office building because they're built at a zero lot line. The other thing I'd clarify here is that any improvements west of here are not on their property. So it's something that maybe you could request Ranch Capital do as the owner of parcel H, but it's not part of this application. So there's probably a difficulty in conditioning any improvements off-site. The foundation plantings, as shown, are really just limited to the north and to the south. And then in lieu of foundation plantings, and part of the reason the numbers are so skewed is that we had them put trees in on the east and the north sides because of the parking garage, because foundation plantings would do very little to help screen that structure. So there's trees there in lieu of plantation or foundation plantings, and that's why those numbers are so off. And then also the linear frontage calculates both facades here, and there's no plantings in there either. So overall, they are probably more dense on the south and northern sides here than they would be in order to get those numbers even in the same ballpark.
So when you have zero lot line, how wide is the sidewalk? The distance
So the
between the
sidewalk
curb
is-
and the
So the sidewalk on parcel H, I believe, is there's a minimum of 5 feet wide, and that parcel H, I believe, is 12 feet in width in order to accommodate. So there will be landscaping in there. It's part of separate FDP. That is probably, and it's what we've seen on those streetscapes. So the streetscapes always encompass, what's going to be planted off to the site, and then what the landscape or the sidewalk width and all that stuff is.
So the
it's something that we
sidewalk
reviewed
is the
through PD.
developer's responsibility?
More
If
than
we-
likely,
we-
right now that's their ownership. Yeah. So I don't know whether or not the developer has a separate agreement, or I couldn't speak to anything like that.
The question is, if we required some of this landscape effect to be in the form of big planted pots that are next to the building so that we have more of a green impact, is that the applicant's responsibility, or would that be the developer's responsibility?
It depends on where it's located. Because if it's on parcel H, that's the developer's parcel.
It's right next to the zero lot line where the
Okay.
building ends.
For the medical office building, that's
Mm-hmm.
the developer's parcel.
Okay.
Just so you know, my agreement with the master plan developer is that the Superior Drive, the sidewalks, the trees, everything up to my property line, or I should, up to the subject property line, is it will be fully improved. So clearly, it's not
the
going to be left
developer?
unimproved.
It's going to be the developer?
From the
or-
developer, correct.
Yeah, okay.
And that's 5 feet.
I think it's up to the easement, or the track itself was
I think it's 12 feet wide.
10 to 12 feet.
Wide sidewalk.
A 5-foot sidewalk, and then parking and/or landscape nodes
Well.
and tree.
I do remain firm that I would like us to consider if we do allow, especially when it's a significant difference between required and actual plantings. I'm not sure how to deal with your precise situation here tonight, but I suspect you're not going to be the only applicant in this 25-year process that has this situation,
But
that
what-
we consider doing a payment in lieu for landscape requirements if they can't be met.
What I'm hearing, though, is that they're proposing trees, which are big things, as opposed to little
Well,
bushes.
there are requirements for everything, right?
I know,
we
but
didn't
you
break
can
it
put,
down.
you can put a lot of little bushes along there and get your numbers, but the point is little bushes are gonna do nothing, and big trees are, so your numbers are down, but your
Yeah,
coverage
well,
is
but
greater.
that-
So I think, in each
I
of
think
these,
that's obfuscating, Clint. We don't know if that's the difference. We don't
that's
know
what,
if they're
I
putting
just,
big
that's
trees
what
rather
Stephen
than
just said.
bush.
Stephen just said
I
that.
didn't hear that.
So staff, yeah, staff did mention, and he's reminded me that not only because of the lot split, if you just analyze that lot, we clearly wouldn't meet it. But if you take it as a whole, there's other potential rubs up against landscape ratios, and that is when you accept zero lot line type developments, clearly there's not going to be foundation plants there. In addition to that, we have a unique situation with a parking structure that's 10 feet away and nothing will grow there. But, potted plants, I would agree. We're going to want to make that as nice as possible. So we're going to do what we can between that area. The trees that block, that are a requirement to screen the parking structures, I think what Stephen was mentioning is why we don't have all those plantings.
Yeah, the
'cause-
reason I didn't hear it the same way as the mayor is I know there's also a lot of shrubbery on this south face. So you have a fair amount of shrubbery going on there. Because when I looked at the plan, I thought, how's this going to grow with no sunlight?
On this side here, the south?
Anyway,
Okay.
I made
Let's-
my point. I'll yield the floor.
Okay, let's continue on with any more discussion about possible conditions and.
Well, Mayor Pro Tem Williams doesn't have a chance yet. He's been very patient.
Can I,
No, we can move on and I can address in the
Okay.
end.
Okay.
a suggestion, I don't know if it's plausible for the top level parking structure lighting issue, motion sensors, would that be a possibility?
I don't know code. I mean, that would make sense to me. But I don't know code. I don't.
Do you mind coming up to can you come up to the mic, please?
You can't use motion sensors because those are metal halide lights, and they would just go, it would take, by the time a vehicle passed or a person, it would be a minute before they heated up, so it won't work. So,
Can't do
Nice thought,
LED?
though.
Can't do LED lights up there?
Yeah.
you can, LED or metal halides allowed to, so,
If you did LED, would you be able to use sensor?
More immediate.
well, it's more immediate, but I'm not sure that the sensor will still work with a vehicle or a person. I mean, I'd have to go back to the engineers and let them look at that for the photometrics. Because that, truthfully, I've never seen that on a parking structure before using that, but something we could look
Yeah,
at.
I think if we want to make that a condition that we work with staff to try to implement that, I'm all in favor in looking into that technology. Clearly,
I
motion
think
sensors work, but
to the extent possible, but what I heard was that with the shielding and the very minimal lighting that is proposed, I think that's, if, in the event that you can't do sensors and have them reliably work, I mean, the thing with sensors is that if they're not working, then you're going to have a situation where
safety
it's
problem.
totally
That's-
dark up there, and that's not good.
that's
either.
why I'd prefer to look at code and follow code the best we
Yes.
can, whether you can change the LED and provide motion sensor if code states you don't use motion sensors. And I've seen them done for off hours where you might use a motion sensor to cut like a percentage of lighting.
Is it possible to
But
do
we're already-
like a lighting study where we could see an image of what it would look like when it's lit? Because I agree with Trustee Dozell that could be an issue looking down at all hours of the night, but we do have to have lighting there. I agree with that as well. So can we see what it would look like, just to, what it would, how bright it would be from a distance?
Certainly, I mean, in terms of finding a fixture that's the same one that we're recommending. I haven't purchased or procured any of these fixtures, but we can certainly try to find some around the surrounding area.
Yeah, I know, town staff has looked at what the lighting would look like on the various fields around town, and they can determine where the throw is and how far away you can really see it. So I know there's got to be something out there that we could actually see an image of what a parking structure would look like, half of it lit up on top from the top of Rock Creek.
Right,
I think a condition that directs staff and applicant to work to
minimize the light. And then I think the idea of, I think the idea of possibly even reducing the light until you need it, because you're talking about the motion sensor. My neighbor has had this for the 19 years I've lived here, that it's very low on their garage until a rabbit or a coyote or a kid or anybody walking their dog or a car
Could be
drives
more
by.
eye-catching and more distracting.
Right.
Yeah.
No.
Well, I mean, if it's bright, comes on bright.
Yeah,
or
it comes on brighter. It doesn't have to come on like Klieg lights, lighting up the movie set for Star Wars or something.
Sure.
But there's got to be a way that we can minimize that, rather than just saying we're going to put a parking lot 15-foot at the top of a 15-foot pole on that 48-foot building. That is going to stick out above Boulder Valley Ice. And I'm telling you, you might not think it is, but it's going to stick out there when you light up a 10,000 square foot area. And I think we need to do something to minimize that. I'm not going to give up on this. We have to figure out a way to
we've
minimize
taken
it.
surface parking lot lighting, and it now is on the top of the structure. And in fact, there's less lights than there would be if we had a conventional parking lot light, just surface parking, because
I don't know that we can solve it right now tonight. I'm just saying that the way it sits right now, I cannot.
I think the best way. I think the best way is to direct further work on this, and it sounds like he's willing to do that.
Right.
Okay. Other questions? I think we should probably close up the. Should we close the public hearing before we finalize this condition list, or?
Is there any, are you opening it up to public comment?
We did one public comment earlier, but
Sorry,
I'll do a second and final
Anything
public
else?
comment.
Okay.
Anyone public comment? Okay, no public comment. Any further questions before I close the public hearing? Okay, public hearing's closed.
Thank you.
All right, board discussion?
I just want to let you know when you're ready. I have two additional conditions drafted, and I'm happy to read those to you or wait until you're done.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
So the new condition E would be based on what I just heard, and we can talk about the language, but applicant shall explore the use of sensors for the lighting on the top deck of the parking structure or other methods to minimize the light escaping from the top deck of the parking structure.
Not only escaping, but actually the whole illumination of it. It's, you light it up, it's going to be lit, the surface. Well, we don't know how much, and that's a point I think that you were making, Chris, too. We don't know what it's going to look like. It may not be, but we don't know.
That's why we typically use the term escaping from. So in other words, you want it to be sufficiently lighted for safety purposes, but you don't want it to leave the premises. So
Or to bounce off
Well,
of it, light up the whole floor.
The other thing
I'm
too
okay.
is,
captures
well,
it.
I mean, if they painted if they painted the deck of the parking lot white, then light would reflect off that. But they're not going to do that. It's going to be concrete color,
which is basically like gray.
or something.
But I think Kendra's language explains that. That's what escaping means.
I think escaping's fine, but just the word explore I don't think is limiting enough.
Okay.
Because they might explore it and have looked at two options and decided to stay with the original. So I like before the suggestion about applicant shall work with staff.
She does have it on.
Applicant shall work with staff
Town staff, okay. Applicant shall work with town staff.
to explore and resolve.
Well,
Just,
I mean-
we
No,
need
that's too
a,
much.
We could just say applicant shall work with town staff to minimize the light escaping from the
Perfect.
top deck of the
Perfect.
parking structure.
Perfect.
And then we
Yep.
could leave it like that, and if sensors are an option, sensors are an option.
could hear
If
you now.
downcast, lighting is a better option, they can do that.
I think
Okay.
Patrick Hammer's already started looking into stuff, not specific for a parking structure, but for other
In
Fields.
fields around town.
Yeah, this
So
is-
he's got to jump on it.
Yeah, this is not
Read
gonna
it
be the
again,
last time
please.
we
Okay, now it just
deal
says
with this.
applicant shall work with town staff to minimize the light escaping from the top deck of the parking structure.
Does that work for you, Chris?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so that would be the new condition E. The new condition F would be, if in the future the parking structure or a portion thereof is converted to public use, an applicant or any successor owner of the parking structure requests that any cost related to the parking structure be considered, in quotes, eligible costs under the cost-sharing agreement dated October 18th, 2013. The request must be presented to the town board for approval, period. The request shall be presented to the town board only after the certification of the independent third-party engineer contemplated by Exhibit C to the cost-sharing agreement.
So just by saying cost-sharing agreement, that implies TIF.
Right. Yeah, it's very specific. That's what sets forth the method in which we determine eligible
I think
costs
that's great.
for TIF.
No, that's very well said. That's good.
And and just to be perfectly clear, up in the introduction to section 3, we had it said that all conditions shall be fully satisfied within 60 days of approval. I've put in parentheses other than subsection F, which is the one I just read to you, because that
Could
will
be
only be
years.
satisfied if
Right.
necessary.
That's good.
Okay.
That's all I've done so far, but I wanted to
Okay.
let you know.
So I would hope that we can look at a condition for dressing up the parking garage in general and also from the US 36 views, other than landscaping.
Having just returned from Las Vegas,
But we're not Vegas.
No, my point is that that city is just awash with parking garages with no elements of design on them, and this is one of the nicest multi-material parking decks around. I agree.
But we're
I agree
actually looking
that-
at it in terms of the design standards that we have for this development, not in terms of nicest in the area. That we're comparing within itself, not outside.
I agree, but I think given all of the circumstances around it, you want the parking deck to the back, and you want the energy in the town center, and that's the way it is.
That's not what I'm asking. What I'm asking is some sort of dressing applied in some way, shape, or
Like what?
form to make the parking garage look more aesthetically pleasing.
Okay, so are there others on board that
No,
have
I have
thoughts
a
on
comment
this?
about, there are 9 trees, if I count them right, along that backside, evergreen trees, that are 10 foot high when they're planted. So, because there's the ones that are very visible, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then there's in between, there's more, the little dash lines. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 trees, 10 trees that I think I can count by looking at that. That's, if they're all 10 foot tall, 10 evergreen trees along there, which those were, if I read the diagram right, would be very nice. And I tell you, my evergreen trees grew, if you water them, they'll grow very fast.
But the building's 62 feet tall.
And no, that
they
parking
take a
garage
very
is
long time to.
48 feet tall. But the parking at the highest point on the northeast corner, I believe, is 48, and then on this side, it's a little bit lower.
I mean, if they grow
So-
25, 30 feet, obviously that's.
Okay, but you're looking
In 25
much
or 30 years,
exactly.
we'll-
20,
I'd rather
30
see
years.
more, what I'm
I
saying
mean,
is
it's
I'd
just,
rather see more
hey,
trees in the
don't you
front of the
really,
building.
don't you want your town center to look nice when you're
I'd like
driving
it
in?
to be on
and-
Superior Way that looks nicer than on
But you know,
the
and it draws
backside of
people
it.
in.
Yeah.
You're on US 36, you see it and you're just like, I don't know what that is.
It's going to be hard to
you should
camouflage
Yeah.
Boulder Valley Ice, the back of Boulder Valley Ice, and a parking garage.
Well, but you
So let's
described
just
Interlochen
continue to
being.
make it look
Do you
not so great.
do you find yourself going into Interlochen though, because those look interesting?
I think unfortunately
I want
this.
to, but I don't work there.
Does anybody else care about this?
Well, I don't
No,
think you can do anything about it.
No, I don't think you can do anything either,
I do-
except there was a suggestion about the one tower,
I think the
making
labor-
it look more, like glazing or something. I don't know if Bill said that, or if Clay, you did, but I'm not even, I'd rather see the front of the building be somehow.
I think we all care, but
Yeah.
what can we, what can realistically be
Well,
done?
can't
And-
we have the applicant at least look at that and try to resolve something that's possible? Maybe it's just some sort of window or mirrored window or just something that reflects, and I don't know. I'm not an architect, but I'm sure
Public
somebody out
hearing's
there
closed.
is.
Yeah, we did.
Clay,
Like,
oh, sorry.
I mean, one of the things that made sense to me is what Bill shared, that eventually as the landscape goes in both behind this parking lot and BVI, and you have the fields, that will make it more attractive than it appears on the screen up here.
It's
So
really, it's
I-
gonna be really hard in the short term, in 2 years, to mask that parking structure or Boulder Valley Ice Cream like that. If you can get them to grow a third of the size of the building, I think that's gonna look really good, but you're gonna see all the other stuff, when it gets built out in 10 years, it's gonna look nice. and
It's
your
just hard for us to
attention's gonna be
visualize it
drawn.
right now when
I
you look
agree.
up on the
And
screen,
it's,
that's
I
all.
think it's too difficult to make a condition that dresses it up. I mean, I
It's a
just don't know how you
suggestion,
do
maybe,
that.
not
But we pondered the lighting for all that time, and here we are looking at, major architectural aesthetics in perpetuity. That's going to always be there. That can't really be changed. So it's something, it's a bigger vision, something to look at.
Okay. Other,
I don't know about a condition, I think it's, you
Um,
guys hear how we feel, I
Well,
guess.
that's my biggest one. I mean, there are other ones that I'd like to see, but this one is near and dear to me.
do you want to go through the others, or?
The others aren't really conditions. It's just, I'd love to see the setback be 10 feet instead of 0. I don't know what I can do about that. I'm not particularly happy about the parking shuffle from private to public to Metro District, to possible TIF financing. That's not loving that. Well, that's about it. So but my biggest one is the architectural viewpoint from all different vantages, especially from US 36. That was the first thing when I saw the project that stood out to me 100%.
I still think if you're going to plant evergreens, can you plant evergreens that grow to 40 and 50 feet versus 20, 25? I know it's going to take a long time, but,
Well, some of those are blue spruce, they could get that tall.
oh, they are blue
We-
spruce,
we-
okay, because those are great trees. Actually, if you have
I'm
blue
sorry,
spruces,
we
they'll
can't
grow.
have.
But I mean, that's actually helpful. If they're blue spruces, that makes a big difference.
And that's like a Band-Aid, and we have a lot of, evergreen trees dying throughout town, so.
Yeah, what happens, Matt, if, Rita counted them 10 or 11, what happens if 3 of them die, 4 of them die the first year? Is this a requirement that goes into perpetuity to keep that number planted?
Yeah, they'll have to replace them.
Okay.
Okay, we have conditions E and F. Anything further? Any further?
Have we said anything about the signage and the lighting? I think Planning Commission had, or the design standards essentially talked about the signs on the building not being on 30 minutes past the closure of the building or something like that. So that's a design standard, and we're not deviating from that. I think the developer, the ICE has asked for a longer time on the garage for the lights to be on, facing east, I guess it is. And I'm not opposed to that, but I don't know whether anybody.
Do we
has
need
any-
to do anything formal to recognize that?
I guess I'm not exactly clear on what, so the planning commission discussed this and didn't make a recommendation on it?
Correct.
Okay, and we want to, if it's already included in this application? If we approve the application, then it will also be approved. In other words, it's not.
It's not in it.
Okay.
So if urgent care stayed open until 10 p.m., does the signage stay lit until 10:30 or so?
I think it's 10:30 by the design
10:30.
standards.
So
I don't recall
if we want to
exactly.
modify that, yes, we would need to put that in here. If the design standards say 30 minutes after, then it
But
must.
does that have to be done in this, or can we do that outside of this?
Can we make it a condition that signage should come back? We've done that before.
Yeah, actually, that's.
Well, they have their sign ban, so then it would just be a submittal to building department for their signs. So I think if you want to have the signs lit for till 10
Until when,
or something,
yeah.
you would make that a condition.
Well, it's,
30
they're lit
minute.
as long as they're in business, you know, so I wouldn't think
Or-
you want a urgent care sign lit after they
Right.
close.
Right.
the
If they close the
facility.
tank, can we have it until then?
Yeah.
But we're not addressing the specific request
On the
that
side,
Joe
yeah.
just mentioned, which
Right.
is on the far edge of the parking garage that
Yeah.
most faces 36.
Right.
Can they have Superior Medical Office Building signage that stays on all night? Or until midnight? Or something to be determined? And I say, look across on the other side of 36, on the Louisville side, and what do they do?
I don't know.
And if they're lit 24 hours, then I see that far edge not encumbering any residents or any businesses, because it's at the far edge.
No, just the cars.
If they want to pay the electricity, they can keep it up forever, especially if the first name
It's Superior.
word is now and forever will be Superior.
Superior Stable.
Not,
Don't say that.
not
I would agree.
Superior Medical Stable. No,
He's a
that-
troublemaker, don't listen to him.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. I think if you drive along the 36 corridor, you're going to see plenty of signs on 24/7.
So you would want it on.
And it's.
I would leave it turned on just that to me
It's for
permanently
recognition. It's-
promotes the town
Yes.
center.
I'm okay with that,
And
too.
Superior is here, you're here.
I mean, do we need a condition for that, or?
I think we should give permission.
So basically, I would just say the signs on the parking structure facing US Highway 36 may remain illuminated indefinitely, is that what?
Is that the discretion
Yes.
of the applicant? Okay.
What, are the signs on 36 for the marketplace, are those lit, and are they lit all night long?
The monuments. Yeah, the monument signs?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, yeah, why wouldn't we leave these on there?
No,
Sorry.
no, we all agree. We just,
Yeah,
good to
we
put
all
it in
agree
writing,
with
that's
that.
all.
Just had to think about it.
What I think we think about, I think we think about is that we also don't want a sign that is a neon flashing something or other.
Like
It
Vegas?
needs to be,
Not
yeah, right,
Vegas,
like
not
Vegas,
Vegas.
where Clint just came back
I
from.
think neon's getting a bad name.
Yeah. Oh, you know her
Okay,
too?
so.
Can you read what
Is
you're?
it only one sign that we're talking about, or is
It's
it?
3.
Okay.
Well, there's two. I think we should only say
No,
the
there's
one
three.
that go along. But
There's
wait a
3.
second.
Three.
But there's three. It's one that faces the park.
It's the one that's Superior Medical Office Building. The tenant within is not my concern, it's the one that.
So if we just say the signs on the parking structure, however many they facing US Highway 36, that's what we're talking about?
Correct.
That's
I'm
Right.
talking one.
No, there's
two.
not one. It's
There's two.
at
There's
least-
now, there's one on each corner.
Okay, there's 3.
Three.
Well, the three is on the north side, I believe, facing,
There's 2
Park.
facing north and 1 facing east.
right. And I don't believe the one facing toward the park
Should stay up all night.
should be on all night.
I agree.
That's the 2
No one can
facing.
see that one
That's the
anyway.
2 facing north.
The
No.
two facing
East.
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 There's two facing east.
And one facing north.
And one facing.
We get up and point out which
Yeah.
elevation we're talking about.
I'm looking at the sign bands right there.
2 on the
2
north
facing
side.
north,
One facing east.
yes.
As Mayor Folsom has explained.
And the ones facing, I mean, you need both, you need all 3 because,
Well, the one that's over here, oh, no, I'm sorry, which one's along 36? The north
they're
garage?
all 3.
So what I'm hearing is the sign facing US 36 on the east elevation would remain on
Right.
indefinitely.
Right.
Or at the
As-
discretion
Or
of
at the
the,
discretion
of the
owner.
owner.
But I
Yeah,
think that, I
Can you
think,
tell us which one's going to say Superior Medical Office Building?
That has not been clarified, so if you
Can
want that to be clarified.
please? And-
No,
No,
no, they can't.
No,
We
no, no,
can't.
let's not get into
Close the
that.
public
Even
hearing.
if he's not talking to us?
No, but also we don't want to
Point.
talk about the content of the sign, so let's, we
Okay, yeah,
can't, we
let's not
can't
do that.
base it on the content,
But
so let's
basically
not go down
facing
that road.
36 is what we're saying.
Exactly.
so
That's right.
they both
Yeah, they-
can face 36.
Yeah.
If you're driving east, you're going to be looking at the north side. If you're driving west, you're going to be seeing the east side.
And I don't see any reason why.
And
it can't be
if
on
if the
all
whole
3 of them.
point is to advertise town center, advertise this building, let's leave them all on.
That's, I think, what the condition read, right?
Well, originally it just said
No,
the
it just
signs
says one.
facing US 36, but
Right.
But they both
they all- which
both
they all
sides
do.
they all 3 face US 36.
okay, and that's why I want to be clear that that's what we're
Yes.
talking about. If we're going to say the 3 signs facing US 36, we mean the ones on the north face and the one on the east face.
So if I'm staying in any of the hotels,
You're gonna have your
by Old
blinds closed at
Chicago.
night when you
Will I
are
be
falling asleep.
staring at a sign in any way, shape, or form out my bedroom window?
You might be, you just close the blind.
The hotels are going to be further west.
The people that will see those signs on this north side could potentially be some of the apartment or condos on Block 6.
true?
Or 7, Block 7.
That's, I don't want to go, I don't want to raise a problem there. That's why I said the far,
This this parking garage is so far to the east and
Yeah, it
it's
looks like
just-
it's
not going
blocked by
to.
the medical
Yeah,
office.
the
building.
angle is right on with eastbound 36,
Yeah,
so
so I don't think there's any impact.
Just
to
leave it
those
for all
residential.
lights at their
The
discretion.
parking-
Too much about it.
The
Or
parking
to
lot
the
lights at the hotel are gonna be more bright than
So just leave it
this.
at their discretion for all three lights.
Okay. Well, you want me to read it now?
Please.
Notwithstanding the sign illumination restrictions in the design guidelines supplement, the signs on the east and north faces of the parking structure facing US Highway 36 may remain illuminated indefinitely as determined by applicant or its successor in interest.
can we have a further sentence that should a problem emerge, the town has the right to?
No, I don't
do
think so.
something?
No.
Just
Well,
have-
because they're going to invest in its illumination based on the fact that they're going to have it illuminated 24 hours, or not 24 hours, but all night long, and then for us to then go back and say, I know you invested a lot of money on these
They're
signs.
investing in
pay for it.
illumination anyway.
But
Sandy, you need to
You have to be
get closer to your.
They're going to invest in illumination anyway, so.
I'm
but-
just saying
but,
that's not
okay, that's
reasonable.
fine, I'm fine with it.
I do wonder, though, who actually is going to see the one that's on the northwest corner of
Well,
the
if you're
parking
driving
structure?
on
36 going.
But you're also going to have one on the northeast corner, you know, so there'll be two on that side. It's kind of, why would you have two on that north side?
I think it's fine.
Yeah.
We'll be okay. Okay, any further conditions? Any further discussion?
Thank you, Kendra.
Thank you. Okay. Trustee Hanson.
I'd like to make a motion, Town of Superior Resolution Number R-36, Series 2016, a resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Town of Superior approving the final minor subdivision plat and final development plan for the Superior Medical Building and Parking Garage, Lot 1, Block 12, Superior Town Center, as amended with conditions.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Trustee Hanson, second by Trustee Gregoris. And we do a roll call vote on this, or?
There's no money being spent.
Okay.
It's up to you.
Okay. All those in favor? We have Sorelli, Hanson, Folsom, Gregoris, and Pennington. All opposed? Dozell, Williams. Okay, motion passes. Thank you very much. Was there anything we needed to do on the vested property rights request, or is that?
No, that was
That's
part of the
included.
resolution that you just passed, so that was.
Okay.
And that's subject to the development agreement.
Okay. All right, thank you all very much. Meeting's adjourned.